Hello and welcome to the Street Crime UK YouTube channel. Please don't forget to like, share, comment and subscribe. Feltham Young Offenders Institution, or more commonly known as HM Prison Feltham, is a prison for male juveniles and young offenders, occupying 45 acres of southwest of Feltham in London Borough of Hounslow. It's operated by Her Majesty's Prison Service. The original Feltham Institution was built after 1857 and opened on the 1st of January 1859 as an industrial school, and was taken over in 1910 by the prison commissioners as their second borstal institution. The current institution was formed in 1991 as a result of a merger between Feltham Borstal and the Ashford Remand Centre. It's managed directly by Her Majesty's Prison Service, rather than management being contracted out to a private firm. Publicity of a pre-2005 wave of violence of the institution was coupled with alleged racism amongst certain officers. These reports took as case in point the murder of Zahid Mubarak by racist cellmate Robert Stewart on the day that Mr. Mubarak was due for release. Proposals made to distance Her Majesty's Prison Feltham from its reputation included a renaming, such as to HMP Bedfont Lakes, receiving scant support. An inspection by Her Majesty's Chief Inspector of Prisons was made in May 2005. The 2005 report highlighted the progress made and praised the effective reception induction procedures and the outreach team that deal with self-harm issues, and the measures in place to deal with race relation issues. Voluntary sector work takes place within Feltham, and its voluntary sector coordinator manages performance of more than 25 agencies for those convicted and placed on remand, or detained pending a trial. Another inspection was made in July 2013, which was critical of what was considered an excessive use of force by prison staff in some incidents, which had taken place in 2012, and an unacceptably high level of violence in the institution. On the 4th of September 2013, the Ministry of Justice announced that it was undertaking a feasibility study on replacing the existing buildings at Feltham with a new, larger adult prison and youth detention centre. A 2014 inspection of the prison found that the progress that had been made in some areas, but there were still some major concerns such as levels of violence remaining high, although with fewer incidents than previously, and prisoners having a lack of activities available and being kept locked up in cells for long periods. Among 3 ex-prisoners who came forward to the BBC in 2015, one reported seeing another having his head being stamped on. Feltham in 2015 was the most violent prison in England and Wales, having hosted 894 attacks or fights, so serious and demonstrable that proportionate prescribed legal punishments were imposed. Among these, inmates who have committed acts of violence may be kept in their own accommodation for 23 hours a day, seeing 1 free hour from solitary confinement. Officers knew of 48 gangs in 2015 among the teenagers, changing population of Feltham's interned. Young adults and juveniles occupy different residential units today. Units housing young adult offenders hold approximately 60 prisoners. Units housing juveniles hold 30 prisoners, and almost all the juvenile rooms are for single occupation. There is a mixture of double and single accommodation for young offenders, mostly double. All rooms have integral sanitation and TV, and all areas operate the IEP scheme, Incentives and Earned Privilege scheme. The prison's regime, including education, full and part-time education, workshops, vocational training in the construction industry, farms and garden works, and also NVQs. Various types of offending behaviour groups are also available. Other features include the use of voluntary agencies, one-to-one teaching, substance misuse work, and pre-release courses. An unannounced inspection of 2017 found that the juvenile units taken together were not safe for either staff or boys, and that the violence had increased in the section for older young men, prompting a Commons debate. A serious assault on a staff member took place during the inspection. The prison was criticised for the 23-hour detention, in that although exercise was possible, showers were not on those days, and sought to improve this. Healthcare was good, and mental health care listed as impressive. Efforts to resettle offenders back in the community after release were also good. In popular culture, there's the hard-fight track of Feltham is Singing Out, which refers to the prisoners. Grime artist JME refers to Feltham in his track Tottenham. There was a televised film called Scum in 1979, which typifies the violence of many such institutions before a key stage of national reform. Its broadcasting unwillingly was delayed to match that reform. The original Feltham was built in 1854 as an industrial school and was taken over in 1910 by the prison commissioners as their second borstal institution. The existing buildings opened as a remand centre in March 1988. The current HM Prison and Young Offender Institution Feltham was formed by the amalgamation of Ashford Remand Centre and Feltham Borstal in 1990. The establishment is split into Feltham A, which holds young people aged 15 to 18, and Feltham B, which holds young adults aged 18 to 21. Feltham A, there are 7 units for young people, each unit holds 30 people. Almost all the cells are single occupation. All cells have an integral sanitation and television unit. Alpine Enhanced Support Unit, Curlow, the Induction and Reverse Cohort Unit, Dunlin, the Normal Location, Eagle, the Normal Location Enhanced Privileges Unit, and Falcon, the Reintegration Unit. Lastly, there is Heron, Normal Location, J, Normal Location. Feltham B, there are 10 units for young adults, including Kingfisher as the first night and induction unit. All rooms have integral sanitation and TV as well. Kingfisher is the induction unit with 53 beds. Lapwing is closed. Mallard is a normal location with 55 beds. Nightingale is a normal location with 55 beds. Osprey is also closed. Partridge is a normal location housing 55. Quail, a normal location with 55 beds. Raven, a normal location with 55 beds. And Swallow, another normal location with 55 beds. Teal is a closed location, and Ibis is the segregation unit. The daily regime within the establishment includes full and part-time education courses, including A-level qualifications which are run in conjunction with A4E and CFBT, distance learning courses from the Open University, and from the National Extension College are supported. City and Guilds courses are also available and include painting and decorating, bricklaying and motor mechanics. There's also an open college network course in farms and gardens. There is a gym open to all inmates which runs activities like badminton, weight training and a climbing wall. The gym also teaches various PE courses and the Duke of Edinburgh Bronze Award. The A part of Feltham was given an inspection in February 2021 and the B part in July 2019. The full report can be read at the Ministry of Justice website. In their latest report, the inspectors said of Feltham A is an establishment in West London that holds children aged 15 to 18. It is jointly managed with an adjacent establishment, Feltham B, which holds young adults. At the time of our last full inspection of Feltham A in July 2019, outcomes for children had declined dramatically and we considered them to be poor, our lowest judgment. This decline was so acute that my predecessor invoked the urgent notification process for the first time in an establishment holding children. The COVID-19 pandemic emerged 8 months later, and managers had to implement restrictions to keep staff and children safe. At this visit, we found that these restrictions had been implemented appropriately, and despite a significant outbreak of COVID-19 among the staff, the establishment had experienced very few cases among the children itself. Since our last inspection, progress had been made, and remarkably in the middle of a pandemic. Children were split into groups of 4, in which they accessed education and other activities. We found that being in small groups had improved the quality of relationships between children and staff. Self-harm had reduced dramatically with only 5 incidents recorded in the previous 6 months, compared to 242 in the same period before our previous inspection. The number of violent incidents had also fallen, although 1 in 5 children felt unsafe at the time of our visit, and there was a concerning rise in multi-perpetrator assaults as friction between different groups increased. The Enhanced Support Unit had been relaunched, and there was a positive ethos enabling children to spend more time out of their cell, including for education and interventions. Health services were generally good with very few waiting lists for clinics, and the dental service was particularly proactive and had established itself as an urgent care centre. This ensured that children could access treatment in the early stages of the pandemic. Time out of the cell had also improved since our last inspection. On average, children received about 4.5 hours a day during the week and 3.5 hours during the weekend. This included face-to-face education, which had been consistently delivered since June 2020. There were some areas where progress was not as good. Support for children to maintain contact with family and friends needed improvement to make sure that video and in-person visits were accessed by all children who wanted them. While the improvement made at Feltham A is commendable, some of this reflects how bad things have been in the time of the urgent notification. Headway has been made with a far smaller population than usual, and the challenge for our local and national leaders is to consolidate and build on this progress as the population increases. And in their report on Feltham B, they said that Feltham B holds convicted male prisoners aged between 18 and 20. It's situated adjacent and comes under the same management as Feltham A, which holds boys aged between 15 and 17. At the time of this inspection, the prison held around 360 prisoners. The prison was last inspected in January and February 2017, when we found that outcomes for prisoners in 3 of 4 of our healthy prison tests, safely, purposefully, actively and rehabilitation and release planning were not sufficiently good. Overall, the results of this inspection mark a significant achievement for an establishment that has faced similar pressures to many others that have not been able to maintain, let alone improve, their overall level of performance in recent times. Having expressed concerns elsewhere that Feltham had been left without a governor for some 5 months during 2018, I am reassured to be told that 2 parts of the establishment will in future each have their own dedicated deputy governor in an effort to ensure greater resilience and continuity. I hope that this will allow Feltham B to continue to make progress and avoid the risk of managerial focus being diverted to address the many problems we found during the inspection of Feltham A. The progress that has been made to date at Feltham B was credible and reflected in the fact that in the space of some 2 years it had managed to achieve or partially achieve around half of our recommendations from the last inspection. In terms of safety, there were distinct weaknesses in the strategic management of violence, the use of disciplinary procedures through the incentives and earned privileges scheme, and oversight of the use of force. However, the weaknesses were to some extent ameliorated by good relationships between staff and prisoners, and compared with other similar establishments, fewer prisoners felt unsafe at the time of the inspection, and fewer reported being victimised. A feature of the establishment that needed attention was the impact that security processes were having on the ability of prisoners to access education, training, work and healthcare. It was telling that our colleagues from Ofsted commented that across the prison, managers did not do enough to ensure that all aspects of the prison regime contributed to prisoners' good attendance and punctuality. Quite apart from whether prisoners were getting to the activities to which they had been allocated, there was also the issue that there were only sufficient full-time activity places for just over half the population. Meanwhile, some 20% of the entire population were employed as residential unit cleaners and painters, where they were under-occupied and poorly managed. We also found that when we conducted the roll checks, some 37% of prisoners were locked in their cells during the working day, which is far too high a figure for a training prison. Living conditions in the residential units had improved since the last inspection, but the condition of cells was no more than adequate. There was still too much graffiti and there was still a pressing need for refurbishment in some areas, particularly the showers. Although the quality of healthcare services was generally good, prisoners, as noted above, were all too often unable to get to their appointments because of regime restrictions or security measures. For instance, in June, prisoners failed to attend 58% of the appointments made with a doctor, around 35% with a dentist and 80% with the optician. This was clearly an unacceptable waste of NHS resources. It was pleasing to see that the well-led and well-organised Offender Management Unit had reduced the backlog of Offender Assessment System, or OASYS, initial assessment from 56% to 19% in the space of 6 months. Feltham B is a complex and challenging establishment, in which to achieve the outcomes that should be of real benefit to prisoners and public alike. It was reassuring that some real progress had been made since our last inspection. Clearly there was still much to do, but we were heartened by the positive attitude by many of the staff about what could be achieved, and the sound relationships between many staff and prisoners that underpinned much of the progress that they had already been made. Clearly there was still much to do, but we were heartened by the positive attitude of many of the staff about what could be achieved, and the sound relationships between many staff members and prisoners that underpinned much of the progress that had already been made. We have seen in the past that progress at this complex establishment has proved to be fragile. I hope that on this occasion it will prove possible to build on what has been achieved and sustain it into the future. Now we're going to look at a prison officer who sent sexual images to teenage inmates and smuggled in parcels who was recently jailed. A married prison officer who felt rejected by her husband sent sexual images of herself to 2 teenage boys at a young offender institution and smuggled parcels into the unit, a court heard. Mum of one, Jordan Traynor, who is 17 weeks pregnant with her second child, was jailed for 18 months after she admitted misconduct in a public office while working as a prison officer. Miss Traynor of Glen Eagles Drive, Normanton, developed a flirtatious relationship with an inmate after she became a prison officer at the Young Offenders Institute in June 2018. She was sentenced for these very serious offences. Prosecutor Jonathan Sharp said this progressed to her taking sexualised photographs of herself and particularly boldly printing copies of those photographs at her place of work before handing the copies to the boy. She also smuggled into the institution several parcels both for him and at the inmate's instigation other inmate. She was to say in an interview that the parcels were phone shaped, though she did not actually see their contents. The Crown's position is that she knew full well these were phones and that she admitted that she was aware she was committing an offence by bringing these items into the institution. Mr. Sharp said that Miss Traynor knew a second 17-year-old inmate had a mobile phone and started sending him sexualised text messages and sexualised photographs. Indeed, she was regularly asked colleagues to swap shifts so that she could be working where the inmate would be, and a message that she sent to him on the morning of December the 23rd, 2019, provides a clear indication of her feelings towards him. It read, "Can't wait to see you today, I miss your face, kiss." Mr. Sharp said that gossip was rife at the young offender institution, and searches of both boys' cells were carried out on December the 23rd, 2019. Each had a record of the defendant's personal mobile number, and the first inmate still had the 2 photographs. The second boy had 3 mobile phones which were seized and examined. Miss Traynor was stopped as she arrived for work and was suspended from duty. She was then sent the second boy a message which read, "I'll not see you again now, I've been suspended," and after receiving no reply, later she sent another message which read, "Full of conversation, aren't you?" Mr. Sharp said that it appears not to have occurred to her that his phone was by then in the hands of the authorities. Miss Traynor admitted what she had done was wrong when she was arrested and interviewed on January 25th, 2020. Mr. Sharp said, as to her motivation, she candidly admitted that in relation to the first inmate, she liked the attention. Mr. Sharp said that Miss Traynor told the police the first boy had blackmailed her into doing some of the things she had done. Jane Edwards, mitigating, said that Miss Traynor has a 3-year-old child and is 17 weeks pregnant with her second child. Miss Edwards said that Miss Traynor has the support of her family and friends in her previous role as a prison officer at Feltham Young Offenders Institution in London, before she and her husband moved to Yorkshire to support his career. The court heard that after the move, her husband went onto a 2-week training course away from home. Miss Edwards said that he barely spoke to her and he told her that he needed space. She said she only received a couple of text messages from him during that time. She felt that she had to rebuild her life. She was aged 24 with a child who was not 2 yet. She felt unsupported and rejected by her husband, the man she had moved to support. She felt rejected by other prison officers. She felt they mocked her London accent. She began drinking heavily, up to 12 cans of Stella a day, and would not have been unusual for her. Miss Edwards said that Miss Traynor has suffered with mental health since she was a teenager and had recently been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. Miss Edwards said that Miss Traynor did not know anyone in Yorkshire, adding that she felt that these 2 17-year-old prisoners were essentially her only 2 friends, the only people she had to talk to. She said that she doesn't understand how she let this happen. Miss Edwards said that as for the explicit photographs, she said she was just happy someone was paying her some interest. She foolishly provided him with some photographs, the 2 found in his cell. He asked her to bring in vodka and cigarettes and asked for more explicit photographs, but she refused. She was told her photos and phone would be passed to the governor if she didn't do what she was asked. She said messages were sent to her saying that she could go to prison for what she had done. She said that she was told to swap shifts, which she did, and was asked to pass notes, which she did. Miss Edwards said that Miss Traynor brought in 4 packages on one occasion and did not know what was in them. Miss Edwards said that Miss Traynor's marriage broke down after she was arrested. She has a new partner now, and he is much more supportive of her. He is the father of her unborn child. Judge Simon Phillips QC told Miss Traynor, "The court has heard you engaged in flirtatious behaviour with these inmates, which clearly you enjoyed. It's been said that on your behalf that these 2 inmates were the only 2 people you could turn to. I don't accept that. There was a hierarchy. There were colleagues who you could, if you had chosen to, turn to for support. You chose not to do that." Jailing Miss Traynor for 18 months, Judge Phillips said, "As a former prison officer, serving any sentence is a challenging and difficult prospect in terms of the reception you may receive from other inmates." After the sentencing hearing, Detective Sergeant Alice Coates of Leeds District Prison Crime Team said, "As a prison officer, and particularly as one working with young offenders, Miss Traynor would have been in no doubt that her actions were a very clear breach of her professional responsibilities as someone in a position of trust." Officers from Leeds District Prison Crime Team worked closely with staff at the Young Offenders Institute to ensure a full and thorough investigation was carried out, which has resulted in Miss Traynor being convicted and sentenced for these very serious offences. So what are your thoughts on Feltham Prison? Are there any stories we missed? Please let us know what you think in the comments below. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, stay safe.
Her Majesty's Young Offenders Institution, HMYOY Aylesbury, is a young offenders institution situated in Aylesbury, Buckinghamshire, England. It is located on the north side of the town centre, on Beerton Road, and is operated by Her Majesty's Prison Service. There has been a prison or a gaol of some description in Aylesbury since 1810. The current prison has been on its present site since 1847. It is of early Victorian design and was modelled on Reading County Gaol. The site was in an area of public buildings that including the workhouse, formerly the Tyndall Centre, and the Manor House Hospital. Since construction, the prison has gone through a variety of changes, starting as a county gaol, then becoming an adult women's prison in 1890, changing to a girls' borstal in the 1930s, and between 1959 and 1961 was an adult male prison, after which it became a male YOI, and since 1989 has held only male long-term prisoners, but that recently changed. In 1998, HMYOI Aylesbury was criticised after an inspection report highlighted its poor health regime, which saw the rapid turnover of 5 senior medical officers in 2 years. The report opened up a wider debate about the pay of medical staff in UK prisons compared to those in the NHS. In 2001, the Imam for HMYOI Aylesbury was suspended after allegations of inappropriate comments after the September 11th New York terror attacks. A year after this, a study of young offenders' diets at Aylesbury, conducted by Surrey University, found that adding vitamins, minerals and other nutritional elements to the diets of young offenders remarkably reduced their antisocial behaviour. HMYOI Aylesbury Prison was back in the headlines in 2007 after it was revealed to have a higher rate of self-harm by inmates than any other young offenders institution in England. Following the introduction of the prison's ACCT, Assessment, Care in Custody and Teamwork system, the rate of self-harm has reduced significantly. In December 2008, police officers and probation service tornado teams were called in to contain a disturbance at Aylesbury Prison, officially described as concerted indiscipline. The incident lasted 6 hours and involved a number of inmates who were taking part in Eid celebrations. A number of these inmates were charged with prison mutiny. In November 2009, a prison officer from HMP Aylesbury was jailed after it was emerged that she had become pregnant after having a sexual relationship with an inmate. The prison officer was also convicted of smuggling 3 mobile phones into HMYOI Aylesbury. Prison officer who had a baby after conducting an affair with a young offender in his cell was jailed in 2009. Kelly Ann McDade, who was 31, gave birth to a boy in February after the relationship with Nelson Delgado, who had been listed as a dangerous prisoner by officials. Miss McDade told colleagues at the Young Offenders Institute at Buckinghamshire that she had become pregnant after a holiday relationship. She had to resign after she was caught on CCTV opening the 21-year-old Mr. Delgado's cell door when all doors in the institute had to be closed for the night in August 2008. Judge Christopher Tyra called her behaviour disgraceful as he jailed her for 30 months at Aylesbury Crown Court. "You engaged in a wholly improper sexual relationship with an inmate," the judge said. "He was in your care." He said Miss McDade would have been trained to report such matters to her superior, and added that the affair could have placed her female colleagues at risk from other offenders who knew about it. They might have expected the other female officers to be susceptible to similar approach. The consequences could have been very serious. Judge Tyra added, "Love is not an excuse." Miss McDade of Aylesbury admitted misconduct in a public office and trying to smuggle 3 mobile phones into another young offender institution where her lover was moved to after the affair came to light. When her home was searched, police found a mobile phone with a message from Mr. Delgado, whom she visits regularly, reading, "I love you, my wife." They had planned to set up home together when they were both freed and bring up their son together, who at the time was 9 months old. Miss McDade had been employed by the Young Offenders Institute for 3 years when she started the relationship with Mr. Delgado in 2008. Nigel Ogborn, who was prosecuting, said that when the prison governor found out Mr. Delgado was the father, he said the relationship could have caused a massive breach of security. Richard Germain, defending Miss McDade, told the court there is no doubt it was an inappropriate relationship, but Miss McDade would say, "You can't help who you fall in love with." Mr. Germain said the relationship had been going on for several months. McDade became pregnant. As a young offenders institution, HMYOI Aylesbury holds long-term male inmates between the ages of 18 and 21. Accommodation comprises of single cells in several residential wings and 1 segregation unit. Currently, due to special measures, the prison is only operating 4 of the 7 residential units. There are full and part-time education programs at the YOI, which range from basic and key skills courses up to art, French and sociology at A level and physical education. Vocational courses and work programs include construction, painting and decorating, bricklaying, motor vehicle mechanics, industrial and general cleaning, laundry, catering and gathering and waste management. Young offenders also have the opportunity to pursue award-based courses, including the Duke of Edinburgh Award. In February 2013, HMYOO Aylesbury appeared in an ITV documentary focusing on the lives of inmates and officers. In 2017, a serious violent incident took place involving many inmates. Young offenders and prison officers were injured and some even needed hospital treatment. In 2018, another riot occurred and it hospitalised 4 prison officers. Prisoners were frustrated because they spent the whole week locked in their cells and only had one chance a week to shower. Violet Bland Suffolgate imprisoned and force-fed in 1912. She wrote of her experiences in Votes for Women. Kitty Byron, who was convicted in 1902 for murdering her aunt, Arthur Reginald Baker, was released from Aylesbury in December 1908. Edith Carew, who was convicted in 1897 in the British court for Japan in Yokohama for murdering by poisoning her husband, Walter Carew. Miss Carew was transferred from Yokohama via Hong Kong in 1897 and released in 1910. Mathilde Carey, a French Renaissance agent during World War II who turned double agent. Miss Carey was held at Aylesbury for the last years of the war, where she acted as an informant against other detainees. Miss Carey was deported to France after the war ended. Constance Markowitz, the first woman MP, commuted a death sentence in 1916 following the Easter Rising and was released in 1917. Florence Maybrick, a former United States citizen who was imprisoned at Aylesbury for murdering her considerably older English husband. Miss Maybrick was released in 1904. Aleem McKenney, author of Borstal, was an inmate from 1949 to 1951. Jade Braithwaite was at HMYOI Aylesbury for a time after being convicted of the murder of 16-year-old Ben Kinsella. He was ordered to serve a minimum of 19 years. If you'd like to see more about Mr. Braithwaite, we have a documentary on him, so please check it out if you have some time. Ryan Herbert was transferred from HMYOI Aylesbury from HMP Stoke on Heath in 2012. He was convicted in 2008 of killing Sophie Lancaster and sentenced to 15.5 years. The prison opened as a county gaol in 1847 and has served as a women's prison, a borstal and an adult male prison before becoming a long-term male offenders institution for 17 to 21-year-olds, serving sentences up to life. In 1989, Aylesbury was designated as a long-term young offenders institution. It held the longest sentenced young adult males in the English prison system. A Wing has 68 cells. B Wing has 68 general population cells. C Wing has 66 induction cells. D Wing has 61 general population and induction cells. E Wing has 81 general population cells. F Wing was a poor copers and sex offenders treatment program wing. And G Wing was a general population wing. The regime at Aylesbury aims to provide a purposeful activity for young prisoners in the following areas: a barbering salon running NVQ2 Level 2 diplomas, construction including painting and decorating and bricklaying for C Skills Level 2, full and part-time education run in conjunction with Milton Keynes College, offering a wide range of courses including English and Maths up to Level 2, personal and social development, ITQ, cookery and art, mentoring schemes allowing young prisoners to have support whilst returning to custody, motor and vehicle mechanics in purpose-built factory up to Level 3, offending behaviour courses including enhanced thinking skills ETS, controlled anger and learning to manage it CALM, drug treatment courses and sex offending programs including SOTP and Becoming New Me, physical education with the opportunity for award-based courses such as the YMCA Fitness Instructors Award, the Duke of Edinburgh Awards, and a wide variety of recreational activities. Radio station and programs created by prisoners, laundry, kitchens, gardens, waste management and general cleaning, resettlement groups offering information on job clubs, housing, etc. Staff mess delivering the MVQ in professional cookery up to level 3. The prison was given an inspection in the summer of 2019 and they had the following to say. HMYOY Aylesbury is a young offenders institution YOI holding male prisoners between 18 and 20. The overwhelming majority are serving sentences from 4 years to life imprisonment. The establishment was last inspected in 2017, at which time we raised serious concerns across a range of issues, but expressed particular worry about safety, for which we awarded our lowest grading of poor. The YOI has since been placed into special measures by HM Prison and Probation Service, and as a consequence of this, the roll has been halved from around 400 to just 200. At the time of the previous inspection, we judged performance in the remaining 3 of our healthy prison tests to be not sufficiently good. On this occasion, we found that in all 4 tests, the appropriate grade was not sufficiently good. So while there had been an improvement in safety, the rest of the grades remained the same. However, it would be quite wrong to infer that there had been no progress made in the time since the last inspection. What we found was that there had been some distinct movement and indeed some improvements within the gradings, but not sufficient to raise any of them to the acceptable standard of reasonably good. In terms of safety, the overall rate of violence had increased, but the seriousness of most of it had declined. It was quite possible that this was a consequence of introducing some free flow in the prison. This has made it easier for prisoners to gain access to one another to fight, but at the same time, more likely to be in the sight of our officers who are able to intervene and de-escalate situations before they become very serious. This is a phenomenon that we have seen elsewhere. However, it was not possible to say whether this was definitely the case at Aylesbury, because there was insufficient analysis of the violence and no clear violence reduction action plan. This was one of our key concerns flowing from the inspection. We were also concerned by the quality of the relationship between staff and prisoners, with a significant number of the latter saying they had been verbally abused or victimised by staff. There was some evidence that key working was beginning to have an impact, but it remained the case that far more needed to be done to improve consultation, focus properly on issues of equality and diversity, handle complaints more effectively, and improve the regime so that it could be a far more greater opportunity for meaningful contact and relationships to develop between staff and prisoners. The regime had been inadequate for Aylesbury for many years, and it remained the case that, for much the week, there had been no evening association. Time out of cell was poor and often unpredictable, and there was no opportunity for prisoners to eat together. For these very basic socialisation processes to be absent or poor in a prison holding young adults, it was clearly unacceptable and needed to be addressed. The fact that the population has halved while staff levels have remained the same should have enabled more positive changes to have been made. There have been some progress, but more needed to be done. At the last inspection, we found that the nationally mandated process for assessing the risks presented by and the needs of prisoners, OASIS, was not working as it should. We made the main recommendation that the concerted action should be taken to reduce the OASIS backlog, but inexplicably, considering the risk presented by the population at Aylesbury, this had not been acted upon. We found that over a quarter of the prisoners did not have an OASIS at all, and too few of the remainder had received proper or timely reviews. Staff tried to work around these failures in a pragmatic way, but could not replicate the comprehensive nature of the approved but failing national process. In recent times, HN Inspector of Prisons has frequently reported that as a process of risk management and sentencing progression, OASIS is showing worrying signs of systematic failure, in some places verging on collapse. We have been told on many occasions that when the Offender Management in Custody OMIC program is fully implemented, with responsibility for completion transferred to Aylesbury, the situation will improve. I had little confidence that this would be the case. It was clear that the Offender Management Unit did not have the resources to absorb the extra work. These weaknesses form one of the key concerns identified by this inspection, and I trust that, unlike our main recommendation in the last inspection, it will not be ignored. It is clear to me that Aylesbury was an institution in transition. It was reassuring that in this instance, I was able to see some positive impact in the prison being in special measures. The halving of the roll, closure of wings pending refurbishment, and attempts to relax the regime had had a positive impact. It was easy for me to see a real sense of ownership and teamwork in the support of the measures that were being taken to improve performance. However, I was concerned by the suggestions that there might be plans to return the roll to its previous number of around 400, but without increasing staff numbers. If this were to happen, and I hope it does not, at least in the short term, I would be very worried about the potential impact on the treatment of and conditions experienced by the prisoners. There were some positive signs in the progress of Aylesbury, an establishment that has experienced some very challenging times. It would be a pity if all that progress were put into jeopardy. For the moment, I would encourage the leadership that they continue on their current path and to build on the findings of this inspection into their current plans. HMP Aylesbury, which specialised in people convicted of violent crimes, has been thrown into chaos by a policy change introduced by Dominic Raab's Ministry of Justice to cope with a national rise of inmate numbers, an official watchdog has found. HMP Aylesbury was suddenly and without sufficient consultation, notice or support changed into a Category C training prison. With the rising number of prisoners needed accommodation elsewhere in the prison's estate, hundreds of Category C or low risk offenders have been brought into the jail. About 23% of the prison population remain men aged 18 to 21, convicted of violent crimes and serving long prison sentences. The change comes as the government prepares for the overall prison population to rise from 84,000 to 94,000 by March 2025. Pressure on the prison estate has led to police cells being used for prisoners. Last week, the Ministry of Justice began rolling out 1,000 rapid deploy cells across the prison estate to boost jail capacity. Charlie Taylor, the Chief Inspector of Prisons, said Aylesbury had been struggling with its existing role, but was now a chaotic prison, which was releasing prisoners with little or no work to reduce their risk of committing crimes again. Challenges have been compounded by this sudden and chaotic redesignation to a Category C training jail, coupled with extreme staffing problems. The prison needs significant and immediate support from the prison service to mitigate the level of risk it presents, not only for the prisoners held there, but also for the community into which high-risk offenders are being released, with little to no work to reduce their risk to re-offending, he said. Inspectors in November and December found a shortage in staff in all grades and disciplines at Aylesbury. This included access to healthcare, time out of the cell, education, skills and work and rehabilitation services. In healthcare, the situation was so dire that the prison service was unable to send prisoners over the age of 40 to the jail because they could not be safely cared for in the jail. Nearly 40% of prisoners were unemployed and had less than an hour a day out of their cells, while many prisoners told inspectors they were unable to shower every day. Those in employment, meanwhile, were frequently unable to benefit from this because of staff shortage or broken equipment. A Ministry of Justice spokesperson said, "We are investing £155 million more every year into the probation service. As this report notes, we are making real progress in providing stable accommodation to vulnerable prison leavers." Andrew Nielsen, director of the campaigns at Howard League for Penal Reform, said, "This report reveals while growing the prison population with little thought for consequences creates more problems for everyone. An understaffed prison, which has failed repeatedly to help young adults move on from crime, has now been placed under even greater pressure because the government is resorting to panic measures to respond to rising numbers. The result has been disastrous, with little to no support to prepare people for safe release." A group of men have been jailed after they took part in a violent group beating in the yard of a young offenders prison. Tyler Fulbell, who was 20, and Jordan Muengilu, 20, both of HMYOY Aylesbury, and Shimar Davis, who was 22, of HMB Dovegate in Uttoxeter, have all been jailed for a violent assault that took place in the Aylesbury Young Offenders Institution. On April 4th, 2021, the trio took part in a group beating on the prison's exercise yard, violently attacking and kicking their victim. At a hearing in Wycombe Magistrates Court in May the 25th that year, the 3 inmates all pleaded guilty to charges of affray. Affray involves the use of threat or violence towards another person that is so severe that the bystander at the scene would fear for their own safety. After the 3 offenders admitted the assault, each was sentenced to serve additional time in the young offenders institutions. Mr. Forbell was sentenced to 16 weeks imprisonment, while Mr. Davies and Mr. Milligu both received 14 weeks. All 3 men were also ordered to pay £128 in costs. Inspectors returning to HMP Aylesbury found a prison thrown into chaos by changes to its role made in response to a national prison population pressure. HMP Aylesbury previously housed young men aged 18 to 21 convicted of violent crimes and serving long sentences. But with the rising number of prisoners needing accommodation elsewhere in the estate, it had been suddenly and without sufficient consultation, notice or support been redesignated as a Category C training establishment. Issues relating to this transition underpinned or were key contributory factors in almost all of the prison's problems identified in this inspection. Charlie Taylor, Chief Inspector of Prisons, said, "Aylesbury has been a prison in difficulty for some time. Successive inspections have found it struggling with its existing role as a young offenders institution, but those challenges have been compounded by this sudden and chaotic redesignation to a Category C training jail coupled with extreme staffing problems. The prison needs significant and immediate support from the prison service to mitigate the level of risk it represents for not only prisoners held there, but also for the community in which the high-risk offenders are being released into, with little or no work to reduce their reoffending. A shortage of staff in all grades and disciplines was very evident at Aylesbury. This included access to healthcare, time out of cell, education, skills and work, and rehabilitation services. In healthcare, the situation was so dire that the prison service was unable to send prisoners over the age of 40 to Aylesbury. Nearly 40% of the prisoners who were unemployed had less than an hour out of their cell. This was so limited that many prisoners told us that they were unable to shower every day. Those in employment, meanwhile, were frequently unable to benefit from this because of staff shortages or broken equipment. Even when the prisoners were able to attend workshops, they were not being taught in the standard they needed to prepare them for employment upon release. Personal protection equipment was not enforced in construction shops, and food handling and hygiene standards were not enforced in catering. Work to reduce reoffending was in flux. 70% of the population were assessed as high risk or serious harm to the public. There were only limited offender management or progression opportunities, virtually no key work, and hardly any support for resettlement upon release, something which has now been a priority following the transition. Safe release planning was undoubtedly compromised by the prison offender management high caseload, and problems with allocating cases promptly to community offender managements in areas like London and the South East. Mr. Taylor said, "Until Aylesbury receives the support it desperately needs to improve, it will remain a high-risk institution." Hello, and welcome to the Street Crime UK YouTube channel. Please don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Today we look at one of the biggest prisons in the UK prison system. HMP Prison Berwyn is a £250 million Category C adult male prison in Wrexham, County Borough, which is in Wales. It is the largest operational prison in the UK, which opened on the 28th of February 2017 and is operated by Her Majesty's Prison Service. The jail's name was announced by the then Governor Russ Trent on the 17th of February 2016. The name Berwyn comes from elements of Middle Welsh, Bar, which means summit or peak, and Gwyn, which means white. A spokesperson for the National Offender Management Service said that the prison has been named after a Welsh mountain range. An original shortlist of 6 names was Bridgeway, Marcher, Craig Tan, D Vale, Whittlesham, and Y Berwyn. These names were suggested by local schools, communities, and historical societies. HMP Berwyn is the first publicly run super prison built in the UK, with a capacity when fully operational of nearly 2,200 inmates. The prisoners, who are referred to as men while in the prison, are housed in twin-bedded cells on landings with 44 rooms on each one. The rooms are equipped with basic phones on which the men can make calls to pre-approved numbers after they have been vetted by the prison authorities. Capacity is capped at 1,300 while staff recruitment continues. Capacity at the jail has been capped to 1,300 while staff recruitment continues. The prison was designed to house over 2,000 men and was supposed to be the cheapest Category C prison in the country, with a projected cost of £14,000 per inmate. However, when a report was made in 2019, it was noted that it was still incomplete and the cost of a prisoner was £36,000 per year. Staff at HMP Berwyn are expected to stick to a set of values. These values are: value each other and celebrate achievements, act with integrity and always speak the truth, look to the future with ambition and hope, uphold fairness and justice in all we do, embrace Welsh language and culture, and finally, to stick at it. There are 3 houses at HMP Berwyn: Alwyn, Bala and Seriog, each divided into 8 communities that can accommodate up to 88 general population residents. The communities are as follows: Alwyn C Uppers houses those with life sentences and intermediate sentences for public protection. Alwyn D Uppers houses enhanced life sentences. Bala B Lowers houses the Healthy Living. Bala C Lowers houses prisoners in the Progressive Unit. Bala D Lowers Gabaith is a resettlement unit. Bala B Uppers Mensai Manay is an assisted living unit. Bala C Uppers Sean Stockter is for veterans and first timers. Bala D Uppers is for improving family futures. Seriog A Lowers Snowdon is for mature residents. Seriog D Lowers is an induction and first night unit. Ogwen Care and Support segregation unit and houses up to 21 prisoners. In 2017, residents of the town Bala in Gwynedd were angered by the use of their town's name in one of the prison's houses, with a petition being started to get the name changed. The petition received over 400 signatures. The first governor, Russ Trent, who had also served as the project manager, was suspended on the 21st of August 2018 following unspecified allegations. Nick Leader assumed the role of governor in 2019. As of today, the number 1 governor is Danny Khan, and has been at this post since October of 2018. The prison is run by Her Majesty's Prison Service as part of the Welsh region. HMP Berwyn was given an inspection in the early summer of 2019. The report went as follows. This report records our first inspection of HMP Berwyn, located near Wrexham in North Wales. Berwyn opened in 2017. It is the first prison to open under the management of public sector for several years and will be the largest prison in the country. Designated as a Category C training prison, the establishment held 1,273 prisoners at the time of the inspection. They were held in 3 residential units, which were in turn subdivided into a total of 8 communities. In time, the prison will be able to hold 2,106 prisoners, although we are told that currently the numbers are capped to allow for the build-up of staff as well as additional activity for the prisoners. Opening a new prison is a big challenge, especially when that process is the subject quite rightly of significant public interest. The challenges can be practical, but they can also be cultural. The prison opened with very clear rehabilitative vision, and it has faced resistance at times. The leadership team are still working hard to find and maintain the right balance between rehabilitation and security. freedom and control, sanction and rewards. As this report will show, some mistakes have been made and we identify some important weaknesses, but we also acknowledge the great effort that has been made to give this prison a good start. The prison is generally ordered and settled, and when measured against the test of a healthy prison, we found Berwyn to be a reasonably respectful place. Against our other tests, there were much more to do. Despite HMP Berwyn being a Welsh prison, about 75% of those held were from England. Arrangement for the reception and induction of new arrivals were impressive, and the clear majority felt safe on their first night. Our survey, however, revealed that about 23% of prisoners felt unsafe at the time we asked them, a figure comparable with other training prisons. Prisoner-on-prisoner assaults were lower than expected, but in contrast, prisoner-on-staff assaults were higher. Both measures seemed to be on a downward trajectory. Some work was being done to reduce the violence. However, other than an interesting initiative on Glendure community aimed at supporting some challenging prisoners, the delivery often lacked drive and needed to be implemented more effectively. We found, for example, 25 self-isolating prisoners who were completely unsupported. Schemes and initiatives. Schemes to incentivise good behaviour were similarly ineffective. Good behaviour were also ineffective. Use of force was higher than in similar prisons, and incidences usually involved the full application of restraints. Oversight was satisfactory, and new strategies to minimise the need for force were being developed. The environment and quality of supervision in the segregation unit was generally good, but the regime was limited. Security arrangements were proportionate and supported by good policing. Drugs had been too readily available, but actions by the prison to reduce the drug supply seem to have had some impact, and the drug testing rate has reduced to 21.49%. This was, however, still too high, and the supply reduction initiatives require greater coordination and drive. There have been no self-inflicted deaths since the prison opened, and self-harm was comparatively very low, but arrangements to support and safeguard those who were vulnerable were not very good. Strategic leadership was weak. Case management of those in crisis needed improvement, and those at risk we spoke to did not feel very well cared for. Most staff at HMP Berwyn were inexperienced, but those we observed were doing their best to contribute to a relaxed and positive atmosphere. Many prisoners felt frustrated by staff inconsistencies and uncertainty. We also observed some poor behaviour going unchallenged. The prison had, however, recognised their need to support the staff, with their attention being focused on the basics of prisoner management. Formal consultations with the prisoners, prisoner applications and formal complaints were delivered with similar inconsistency. Were all very positive. The prison has been successful in its aim to make such a large prison feel small. There was a real sense of community in most wings, and staff teams and prisoners spoke of their community rather than a wing. The promotion of diversity and equality in contrast was poor, although healthcare provision was good overall. Employed prisoners had a reasonable amount of time out of their cell, but it was much worse for those without employment, who had about 2.5 hours per day. During spot checks, we found that 28% of prisoners locked up during the working day, which, for a new training prison, was very disappointing. Routines were rarely curtailed, but often delayed, and not all staff and prisoners fully understood the requirements of the daily schedule or regime. One of the greatest challenges facing the prison was the lack of activity places. It is difficult to understand how and why the procedure of work and training places for a new prison could be so delayed. Facing a rising population and too few activity places, Prison managers have created a range of activities and there was sufficient places for the current population, but some were inadequate in quality and lacked challenge. Even those that were available were not fully used. Many prisoners were unemployed or failed to attend, and staff did little to support a sound work ethic. In contrast, those attending education or vocational training generally received excellent teaching, made useful progress and achieved very well. Our partners in Eston assessed provision to be good or excellent in 4 of their measures, and adequate and requiring improvement in just leadership and management. The prison was struggling to develop its approach to offender management and resettlement. The makeup of the population was not as had been originally envisioned. There had been no assessment of the current need. Many prisoners were serving long sentences, presented a high risk of harm, and too many prisoners did not have an up-to-date assessment of risk, which is known as OASIS. Offender management caseloads were too high, and case management was inconsistent and reactive. Public protection measures were similarly weak, and the prison lacked sufficient offending behaviour interventions to meet the need of the population. Work to resettle prisoners was better, but about half of those being currently released. At the time of the inspection, resettlement support for these prisoners was due to end in April, which was a concern. In this inspection, we met many managers and staff who were working hard to make a success of this new prison. Senior managers described themselves as being on a journey, and we saw lots of work, many policies and numerous plans. What was needed was better oversight, better coordination and sustained delivery. The staff seemed to us to be a strength of the prison, but they needed to support in delivering the basics of consistency. We thought the prison had made a good start. We were impressed by the energy and optimism we observed, and there was clearly a potential to move on rapidly. We hope that our encouragement to focus on the basics and the few recommendations we make will assist in that progress, and we hope to guide HMP Berwyn to becoming an endurably safe and rehabilitative prison. What are your opinions on HMP Berwyn? Do you believe that a jail which is based in Wales will be able to rehabilitate its 75% population which is returning to England? Have you or anyone you know been to HMP Berwyn? What was your opinions of the place? Please let us know in the comments below. Thank you for joining us today. If you enjoyed this content, please don't forget to like and share, and if you're new to the channel but you enjoy Street Crime UK content, please don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell button so you can join us on the next video. Thank you for joining us today, and until next time, stay safe. Hello, and welcome to the Street Crime UK YouTube channel. Please don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe. Today we're going to look at a prison which is notorious within the UK prison system. A prison which is located right in the heart of the West Midlands. Prison Brinsford. HMP and YOY Prison Brinsford is an adult male category B and C prison and young offenders institution, or otherwise known as a YOY. Located in the village of Featherstone near Wolverhampton in Staffordshire, which is in England. The prison is operated by Her Majesty's Prison Service. Brinsford was opened in 1991 as a YOY and remand centre. The site had been previously acquired from the Ministry of Defence and already housed Featherstone Prison. In 2001, Brinsford was branded a disgrace after the inspection found the prison's regime to be negligent and lacking in understanding towards prisoners, with large indicators of self-harm, fear and safety, and bullying at the prison. A year later, 2 additional education blocks were built at Brinsford, with the regime promising a renewed focus on education and training at the site. In 2003, 4 prisoners escaped from Brinsford after assaulting a prison officer and stealing his keys to the administration blocks. The 4 inmates then smashed a window and escaped over the prison's perimeter wall. In 2008, an additional residential unit and activity centre was built at Brinsford. This resulted in a reduction in places for juveniles and an increase for young offenders at the prison. In 2016, it was in the process of changing into a Category C male prison. Since the beginning of 2019, Brinsford has become a Category B and C male prison, mainly due to the rise in violence, self-harm and drug abuse. It has been named as one of the worst prisons in the United Kingdom. Brinsford holds young offenders and adults, those who are over 18. Accommodation at the prison comprises of 5 residential units. Unit 1, which is a supported living unit for those prisoners with mental health and complex needs. Unit 2, which is for men who are attending work. Unit 3, an induction to the prison. Unit 4, which is a healthy living unit. And Unit 5, for those men reaching an enhanced level of behaviour within the system. All cells at Brinsford have internal sanitation, a television and electricity, while cells in Unit 5 also have showers. Education at the prison is provided by Milton Keynes College, and courses offered inside the prison include literacy and numeracy, social and life skills, communication and application of number, practical crafts, visual art, cookery, information technology, painting and decorating, woodwork, horticulture, cleaning science, physical education and music. Other facilities at the prison include a gym and sports pitches. There is a chapel service, a job centre, PIN telephones, legal services, incentives and earned privilege schemes, connections and the Samaritans. A November 2013 inspection at HMYOY Brinsford found that the situation at the institution had not improved since the previous inspection in 2012. The Chief Inspector of Prisons stated that Brinsford had the worst overall findings my inspectorate has identified in a single prison during my tenure as a Chief Inspector. The report found that the prison failed at inducting new inmates to the regime, that the level of violence was too high. The quarter of inmates surveyed said that it was too easy to get hold of drugs in the prison. The report also found that many cells were squalid in condition, and that the communal areas were dirty and in need of refurbishment. The inspectorate found that just under a third of the inmates were not engaged with either work or the education programs. Overall, they found that the institution required significant improvement, and that while staff were aware of the problems raised, they were overwhelmed and unable to improve the situation. There have been many violent incidents that have happened in Brinsford. Here is one that happened very recently. Abdi Rehman Eza, who was 21, assaulted John Henry Smith, who was 26, at HMP Brinsford on the 5th of December 2020. Mr. Eza punched Mr. Smith against the side of the head and from behind while he spoke with 2 other inmates. This caused him to fall and hit his head against the door frame, and then against the ground. The force of the punch broke his jaw and rendered him unconscious. Mr. Smith suffered serious brain injuries which he could not recover from. He was taken to hospital the following day, where he died. Due to the overwhelming evidence against the defendant, Mr. Eza pleaded guilty to manslaughter on the 22nd of January 2021. Mr. Eza was due for release in May this year, but following his guilty plea, Mr. Eza was then sentenced at Staffordshire Crown Court to a further 2 years and 7 months behind bars. Sabir Pathan of the Crown Prosecution Service said, "This was a completely unprovoked attack. Mr. Eza struck Mr. Smith from behind while he chatted to 2 other inmates and was not prepared for the attack. His reckless actions led to the death of Mr. Smith. Mr. Ezra was due to be released in May of 2021, but he will now remain in prison for considerably more time, where he will have to face what he has done and reflect on his actions. What are your opinions on HMP Brinsford? Do you agree with the Chief Inspector of Prisons, who stated that Brinsford was the worst prison he had ever seen in his entire time being an inspector? Have you or anyone that you know been to Brinsford? What were your opinions? Please let us know in the comments below. Thanks for joining us today. If you enjoyed this content, please don't forget to give it a like and a share. And if you're new to the channel, please don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell button so you can join us on the next video. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, stay safe.
Hello and welcome to the Street Crime UK YouTube channel. Please don't forget to like, share, comment and subscribe. Today we look at HM Prison Chelmsford. Her Majesty's Prison Chelmsford is a Category B men's prison and young offenders institution located in Chelmsford, Essex. The prison is operated by Her Majesty's Prison Service. Chelmsford began as a county jail in 1825 before transforming into a Category B prison, a young person's prison and a local prison. 1825, the newly completed Springfield prison, where some 43 individuals fell victim of the executioner's rope in the years up to the end of 1914. The prison's main entrance was originally through an austere stone-built Pofter's Lodge in the middle of the Springfield Road frontage. The lodge's flat roof was designed to support the gallows, scaffold and drop, while the forecourt could easily accommodate the hundreds and sometimes thousands of spectators that would congregate for an execution. The first private execution at Springfield was that of Michael Campbell. The 28-year-old Berwick-born tailor and former soldier was convicted of murder of Samuel Galloway, a retired dock worker in Stratford. In 1999, the management at Chelmsford Prison was severely criticised by the Chief Inspector of Prisons after finding that staff were failing to respond to cell alarms 5 years after a prisoner was beaten to death by his cellmate. The prison was also criticised for unacceptably bad conditions of uncleanliness. A further inspection a year later confirmed these failings at the prison. In 2002, conditions at Chelmsford were condemned as poor and cramped by the Goals Board of Visitors. However, in 2005, Chelmsford was praised in its inspection for improving standards and procedures for inmates at the prison. On the 25th of December 2007, 18-year-old Abdullah Hagar Idris hanged himself in the prison after he was told that he was going to be deported. In January 2013, the Ministry of Justice announced that the older parts of Chelmsford Prison will close, with a reduction of 132 places. In December 2015, a riot led to 6 members of staff needing hospital treatment. Education at the prison is contracted to Milton Keynes College, and courses offered include literacy, numeracy, information technology, art, barbering, journalism, cookery, ESOL, as well as social life and programs. The prison's gym also offers physical education with industry-related qualifications, as well as recreational gym. In addition, the prison has links to and facilities provided by organisations such as the Job Centre and the Samaritans. There is also a prison visitor centre operated by the Ormiston Children and Families Trust. Staffing at the prison has been reduced by 25%. According to the Independent Monitoring Board, bullying, violence and self-harm have increased markedly at the prison due to staff shortages. Budget cuts and the inability of the prison service to recruit and retain staff led to fears for the prison's safety. The prison is becoming more dangerous and less effective. Prison healthcare provided by Care UK is considered poor. There were delays in getting medication and reliance on agency staff to fill vacancies. There is insufficient secure mental health accommodation outside the prison for the most vulnerable inmates. The Independent Monitoring Board stated that the level of service being provided to care for prisoners' physical and mental health needs remains inadequate due to staff shortages the staff were unable to provide engagement work or education for prisoners. Illegal drugs are a problem. Use of force by staff is increasing, and there is insufficient monitoring if this use is appropriate. Following the death of a vulnerable inmate in January 2017 and criticism from the Prison Ombudsman, Care UK announced it would end its healthcare contract there, as the level of the resource the prison service made available was insufficient. Drug use is a serious problem at Chelmsford, according to HM Inspectorate of Prisons. 42.6% of prisoners failed drug tests, and organised gangs supplied prohibited items. Inspectors described significant concerns about safety and excessive levels of violence. Much of the violence is due to supply and the use of prohibited substances. Peter Clark said that the rising violence, suicides, and accessibility of drugs and bad living conditions made him consider using the urgent notification protocol, which would make the Justice Secretary take action. In 1 month, prison authorities seized £15,000 worth of illegal goods. There were 17 suicides at Chelmsford during the 8 years to 2018, and 5 of them were since the inspection in 2016. Deborah Coles of Inquest said the prison was incredibly unsafe due to the rate of suicides, and said that it suggested the plethora of recommendations following previous self-inflicted deaths have not been implemented. Recent inquests into deaths at Chelmsford Prison have highlighted failures around the management of self-harm procedures, a lack of staff training in mental health awareness, inadequate risk assessments, and failures in responding to bullying. The failure to implement existing guidelines on the care of those at risk indicates a lack of care, neglect, and inhumane treatment from punitive and often inflexible prison regimes. Problems inspectors drew attention to included that 40% of prisoners who did not take part in activities were locked up in their cells for 22 hours a day, and items including mattresses and pillows were in short supply. The Howard League for Penal Reform maintained that Chelmsford was designed to hold 521 men, but the prison actually held 700 men when it was inspected. Dean Saunders, 25, killed himself at Chelmsford in January 2016. An inquest jury found that Saunders was downgraded from continuous watch to half-hour checks for financial reasons, and neglect contributed to his death. Care UK, a private company running healthcare at Chelmsford, treated financial consideration as a significant reason to reduce the level of observations, although they were warned repeatedly about Dean's mental condition. Dean's mother pleaded with staff to keep him under constant watch. The jury stated that Mr. Saunders and his family were let down by serious failings by mental health services and the prison system, and that the assessing his mental health needs was not adequately conducted, with multiple failings in recording and passing on information. Dean's family stated that hospital, not prison, is where Dean deserved to be and needed to be. We as a family, together with our lawyers and inquest, want Dean's death to mark the end of empty promises and a start of change. The Prison Ombudsman also found significant risk factors were ignored when observation of Dean Saunders was cut back. He found those trying to care for Dean felt that he should be in a mental health facility rather than prison. He added that I am also concerned that there appears to have been some confusion at Chelmsford about the process for transferring mentally ill prisoners to hospital, which meant that an opportunity to transfer Mr. Saunders in December of 2015 was missed. Sadly, the criminal justice system did too little to protect this very vulnerable man. Dean's father, Mark Saunders, said, "There was no proper medical structure there. We were lied to and misled all the way through. We were devastated." In 1990, former professional footballer Tony Adams spent 57 days of a 4-month sentence in HMP Chelmsford for drink driving. The 1979 film Porridge, a film version of the Porridge TV series, was filmed almost entirely on location at Chelmsford Prison. The punk rock band The Sex Pistols recorded a live album at the Chelmsford Prison called Live at the Chelmsford Top Security Prison. Chelmsford was built in the 1830s as a county jail close to the centre of Chelmsford. 2 new residential units were opened in 1996, E and F wings, to relieve overcrowding, and a 3rd unit, G wing, was opened in 2006. It serves courts in Essex, taking men whose homes are mainly in the Essex area. It holds those who are sentenced on remand or on trial, and it holds adults, some young adults, and also foreign national prisoners. The oldest part of the establishment houses 4 wings, A, B, C and D wing, off a central hub with E, F and G being opened more recently. A wing includes the segregation unit. B wing is an induction and general population unit. C wing and D wing are also general population units. E wing is the integrated drug treatment unit. F wing is general population, and G wing is housing for vulnerable and enhanced prisoners. The newer part of the prison has a 12-bed, 24-hour healthcare unit. The prison has a Samaritan support listener scheme in place for prisoners who are in distress or who need to talk in confidence. Specialist organisations are based within the prison, forming part of the reducing reoffending agenda to actively engage prisoners with all elements of resettlement. These include Narco, CTEC, the Job Centre Plus, Ormiston Children's and Families Trust, and Inside Out. Assistance is available on a wide range of issues: money and debt guidance, help to open a bank account, drug and alcohol interventions, multi-agency resettlement and pre-release clinics, job clubs, and developing ties with prisoners and their children through storytime learning and children's visits initiatives. Partnerships are also held with external companies helping to drive education and employment opportunities in preparation for release. The Safer Custody Helpline is an answer machine service that can be used by prisoners or their families to report bullying or to report concerns about self-harm or suicide or any other safer custody issue. Healthcare is provided by the NHS via North Essex Partnership NHS Foundation Trust in a purpose-built facility within the prison, in the newer part of the prison. It has a 12-bed 24-hour healthcare unit. The prison inspectors have made a follow-up IRP to Chelmsford after their inspection in May 2018. In the summary of their report, they said, "At our inspection of HMP Chelmsford in May to June 2018, we made the following judgment about outcomes for our prisoners. The safety was poor and not sufficiently good in 2016. Rehabilitation and release planning was reasonably good and previously was sufficiently good. HMP Chelmsford is a medium-sized local prison holding prisoners on remand and sentence. It had an operational capacity of over 700, but at the time of this review visit, the population had been reduced by about 60 to enable the refurbishment of some wings. However, this reduction was a temporary measure and we were told that HMPPS would increase the population in the very near future. As the prison was overcrowded, even with the reduced population, we had major concerns about the return to the unacceptable overcrowding we saw last year, and the inevitable impact of this, particularly on the safety and decency of everyone. The last full inspection was carried out in June 2018, and we had key concerns in many areas of our healthy prison tests, which had persisted and even deteriorated in some areas since the previous inspection in 2016. We gave our lowest possible judgment on safety because of several major concerns. For example, the level of violence was very high and some was serious. There was a lack of insight into the causes of violence and little action taken to reduce it, despite a desire by staff to make improvements. Illicit drugs and other banned items were easy to obtain, and the mandatory drug testing MDT rate was one of the highest recorded in England and Wales. Prisoners at risk of self-harm were not managed well enough, and there had been a high number of self-inflicted deaths, 16 in the previous 8 years. The living conditions for prisoners were mixed, and there were unacceptable standards of cleanliness and lack of access to some very basic items. Healthcare leadership needed improving, and some important areas of the provision needed urgent attention. Purposeful activity also received our lowest judgment. The lack of time out of cell, with many prisoners spending up to 22 hours a day locked up, was a major concern. The number of deaths in custody through suicide and the suspected use of illicit drugs remained worrying, but there had been reasonable progress in improving the quality of care for prisoners in crisis or at risk of self-harm. However, the prison needed to keep recommendations from the Prisons and Probation Ombudsman, or PPO, under constant review to ensure that the progress was sustained. Major investment in refurbishments on some of the older wings had delivered much needed improvement to the conditions of many showers, toilets and cells. Prisoners now had better access to basic items, such as bedding and pillows, although the prison needed to do more to sustain this advance. The prison had dealt with most of the litter and rubbish we had seen previously in the external communal areas and cell window grills. There had also been reasonable progress in the provision of healthcare. The new provider commenced just 2 weeks before this review, and it had already begun to address many of our concerns. However, it was inexcusable that Her Majesty's Prison Service had still not equipped the prison with a more up-to-date drug detection equipment. Chelmsford needed to make further reductions in the supply of drugs, a priority to safeguard prisoners' health and well-being, as well as making the prison safer by reducing violence and debts. Consultations with prisoners had improved but needed to be more widely publicised across the prison. Some prisoners remained frustrated at their inability to gain answers to simple requests or queries. Time out of cell, although more predictable across the prison, remained very limited, particularly in the evening and at the weekends and for those not involved in purposeful activity. Despite the Governor's aspiration to provide at least 1 hour a day for outdoor exercise, most prisoners still only had 30 minutes, which was not enough. In rehabilitation and release planning, I had concerns about the delivery of the Community Rehabilitation Company contract and some key weakness in offender management arrangements. The CRC provision through the crime reduction charity shown reasonable progress with clear signs of further advances underway. There had been little development in increasing offender supervision contract with some prisoners, and the interdepartmental risk management team was not well defined and did not provide the oversight needed for high-risk prisoners being released into the community. Last year I clearly noted my confidence in the prison's capacity for change and improvement, and this was well founded. The Governor continued to set a clear vision for the prison and had retained the support of those around her. We have identified good or reasonable progress in 4 key areas, and this report makes clear what needs to be done to make advances in the remaining weak areas. The prison was inspected in August 2021, and in their report the inspectors said that Chelmsford is a Category B local prison and resettlement prison for adult and young adult men. At the time of the inspection, 712 prisoners were held in a sprawling institution, comprising older wings from the Victorian era and more modern facilities added from the late 1990s. Following this inspection, I wrote to the Secretary of State on 26 August 2021, invoking the Urgent Notification Protocol. I set out in detail my concerns about the prison and the judgments that had caused our concerns of action. Under the protocol, the Secretary of State commits to respond publicly to the UN within 28 days, explaining how outcomes for those detained will be improved. The Secretary of State's response, for which I am grateful, is also detailed further resources for the report. We had last inspected Chelmsford Prison in June 2018 and reported our serious concerns about the conditions we found. At that time, we assessed outcomes in safety and purposeful activity as poor, our lowest assessment, and in respect, not sufficiently good. Only in rehabilitation and release planning did we judge outcomes to be reasonably good. Despite this, the then Chief Inspector was reassured by both local management and the HM prison system and probation service that they were aware of the problems at the prison and would implement strategies for improvement. Sadly, that optimism was misplaced. At this inspection we found no improvement in outcomes in safety and purposeful activity, both of which remained poor, no improvement in respect where outcomes remain not sufficiently good, and a deterioration in rehabilitation and release planning to not sufficiently good. In reaching these judgments, I took full account of the additional pressures placed on the prison due to COVID-19, but also the failure of the Special Measures Programme and the initiatives introduced by Her Majesty's Prison Service to drive the improvement. These had not worked. As at our last inspection in 2018, a new governor had been appointed a few months before we arrived. We were encouraged by his vision and enthusiasm for the establishment, but we were also struck by the seeming intractability of the failings at Chelmsford. The last time we were able to write a positive report about this prison was 10 years ago, and it was clear to us that the jail was failing in its basic duty to keep those it held safe. This report also highlights our concern about the negative and damaging staff culture. Many staff were new or inexperienced, their morale was low, and they were disengaged from their work and dismissive of the men in their care. Prisoners found it very difficult to access even the most basic entitlements, and were frustrated that they could not get things done. We were told that this frustration had led to an increase in assaults on staff. The negative culture among some staff was compounded by a lack of management oversight or accountability, which allowed poor staff behaviour and practice to go unchallenged. The paucity of the daily regime meant that many prisoners spent extended periods locked up and isolated in their cells. It was no surprise that many prisoners told us they felt unsafe at the prison. Such factors, combined with the inherent risk and vulnerabilities associated with Chelmsford's status as a frontline local establishment, and the failure to grip prison's problems over the recent years, meant that Chelmsford met our criteria for an urgent notification. I concluded my letter to the Secretary of State by saying that HMP Chelmsford would not improve without a sustained drive to make sure that all staff members take responsibility for creating a safer, more decent environment, a meaningful regime, and greater engagement with training and education. I argued that this will require strong and consistent leadership at all levels within the prison and much more effective support from Her Majesty's Prison Service. As we indicated in 2018 and repeat now, the drift and decline at this prison must be addressed. In accordance with the protocol between HM Chief Inspector of Prisons and the Ministry of Justice, or MOJ, I am writing to you to invoke the urgent notification process in respect of HMP and YOI Chelmsford. An unannounced inspection of the prison between the 9th and the 20th of August 2021 identified numerous significant concerns about the treatment and conditions for prisoners. This is the most recent in a series of concerning inspections over the last 7 years, and these findings were particularly disappointing bearing in mind the observations my predecessor made in 2018. At that time, the then Chief Inspector decided against instigating the UN protocol, having been persuaded that the prison had already begun to show signs of improvement under a new governor, with the support of Her Majesty's Prison Service. This latest inspection showed that these improvements have not materialised. As required by the process, I will set out in this letter the key evidence underpinning my decision to invoke the UN protocol. In addition, I attach a summary note with the main judgments from this inspection drawn from a similar document provided to the Governor at the end of the inspection last week. The Governor, the Prison Group Director and Ministry of Justice officials have been informed of my intention to invoke the UN process. I shall, as usual, publish a full inspection report in due course. The decision to invoke the UN process is determined by my judgment, informed by relevant factors during the inspection that, as set out in the protocol between HM Chief Inspector and the MOJ, may include poor healthy prison test assessments. Inspection methodology is outlined in the HM Prison Test Inspection Framework. The pattern of the healthy prison test judgments, repeated poor assessments, the type of prison and the risk presented, the vulnerability of those detained, the failure to achieve recommendations, and the Inspectorate's confidence in the prison's capability and capacity for change and improvement. The protocol sets out that this letter will be placed in the public domain and that the Secretary of State commits to respond publicly to the concerns raised within 28 calendar days. The response will explain how outcomes for the prisoners in this institution will be improved in both the immediate and long term. The then Chief Inspector was reassured by both local management and Her Majesty's Prison Service that they were slighted on the problems at the prison and a strategy was in place. Leadership at both local and regional level readily acknowledges the gravity of the issues facing the jail, and Her Majesty's Prison Service has already placed the prison in special measures. I therefore concluded that on this occasion I had sufficient confidence in the ability of the prison to improve that I would not invoke the urgent notification protocol. At the latest inspection in August 2021, we found that the optimism had been expressed 3 years ago was misplaced. Chelmsford, like nearly all other prisons, had been hit hard by the virus, but the failings that we have identified are deep set. In addition, we were told at the 2018 inspection that Her Majesty's Prison Probation Service had in place a special measures plan of intervention for Chelmsford. This programme had, however, proven to be largely ineffective in improving outcomes. The chronic and apparently intractable failings at Chelmsford have now been evident for at least a decade, with our inspection in 2011 being the last time we felt able to report positively on the prison. It has sadly failed in its responsibility to keep prisoners safe. We have now assessed outcomes in safety as poor for 2 consecutive inspections and not sufficiently good for the 2 inspections prior to that. The prison's record in providing purposeful activity, including training and education that may equip prisoners to lead productive lives on release, is equally poor, and the prison's performance in ensuring a measure of respectful treatment is still not good enough. Even rehabilitation and release planning, a former strength, has deteriorated. Of 9 main recommendations we made 3 years ago, none has fully been achieved. These factors, combined with the inherent risks and vulnerabilities associated with Chelmsford's status as a frontline local establishment, mean the prison meets all our criteria for an urgent notification. Some of the key findings from this report revealed a dominant staff culture that is negative and damaging and has led to the failure to promote safety, decency or rehabilitation among prisoners. Although a few staff members we spoke to were committed and constructive, many others described very low morale, disillusionment or disengagement. Although a few staff members we spoke to were committed and constructive, many others described very low morale, disillusionment and disengagement. Staff members often failed to respond to even basic requests from prisoners, and too many were dismissive and showed only limited empathy and care for those whom they were responsible. Prisoners experienced real frustration in getting anything done, with leaders suggesting to us that the rise in assaults on staff was a direct result of these issues. Almost half of the prisoners in our survey said that they had been victimised by staff, particularly those with disabilities and mental health problems. Nearly a third of staff had under 2 years experience, but they had yet to receive adequate mentoring or support. Prisoners were not sure when they would be unlocked as the court day was not published. Often, first night cells approved for occupation by managers were by the 26th of August 2021. Emergency cell bells were often only answered after long delays. Despite our recommendations and the subsequent intervention of the Prisons and Probation Ombudsman, outcomes had deteriorated. 8 self-inflicted deaths and 4 non-natural deaths had occurred since our last inspection. This is also the 4th consecutive prison inspection where we have reported increases in the rate of self-harm. We found many weaknesses in the assessment. Care in custody and teamwork, or ACCT, and other preventative processes, failing in the night safety procedures, and a lacklustre approach to the use of data and action planning. Over a quarter of prisoners said that they felt unsafe at the time of this inspection, and more than half had felt unsafe at some point during their stay at Chelmsford. Analysis of data was poor, preventing a deeper understanding of risks, so it was not surprising that plans to tackle violence and improve outcomes were limited or non-existent. The lack of accountability we referred to earlier manifested itself in an over-reliance on the small safer custody team, whose work was given insufficient priority, and in failure of other staff members and senior leaders to take responsibility. At this inspection, we found many prisoners locked in their cell for almost 23 hours a day. This reflected the COVID-19 restrictions, but even in 2018, many prisoners were locked in their cell for 22 hours a day. Some restoration of education had recently begun, providing some additional activity, but a third of these places were unused. Plans to reintroduce a meaningful regime were limited and being implemented far too slowly. Chelmsford is a violent, unsafe prison, in which conditions for prisoners have declined disturbingly over recent years, despite attempts by Her Majesty's Prison and Probation Service to support improvement. Many failings stem from a negative and demoralised staff culture, which results in little apparent concern for or attention to the welfare and basic needs of a complex and at times vulnerable population.
Hello, and welcome to the Street Crime UK YouTube channel. Please don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe. Today we're going to look at a prison which is in the north of England, HM Prison Durham. Her Majesty's Prison Durham is a Georgian era reception Category B men's prison, located in the Albert area of Durham, in County Durham, which is in England. The prison was built in 1819, and the prison continues to be operated by Her Majesty's Prison Service. Female prisoners were housed at HMP Durham, but they were moved in 2005 due to overcrowding and suicides. HM Prison Durham was built in 1810, consisting of some 600 cells, and took its first prisoners in 1819. Durham Prison is adjacent to Durham's Crown Court. The prison has held a variety of different category prisoners, both male and female, over the course of its history. Between 1869 and 1958, 95 judicial executions took place on the gallows at Durham's prison or in the courthouse. In 1832, protests over the working conditions in South Shields workhouse were supported by miner strikes. Soldiers were sent to evict striking miners from their pubs. One miner was convicted of murder of a local magistrate near Jarrow Slake. He was hanged amid heightened security of 50 mounted hussars and 50 infantrymen who were there to protect the gallows. His body was gibbeted after death. On the 17th of December 1958, the final execution took place when Private Brian Chandler, who was aged 20, was hanged for the murder of Martha Dodd during the course of a theft. Mr. Chandler was a soldier based at Catterick Camp who beat the 83-year-old Mrs. Dodd to death with a hammer. During the late 1960s and 1970s, the prison became a study project for Stan Cohen and Laurie Taylor, which led to their publication of 3 books, namely Psychological Survival, The Experiments of Long-Term Imprisonment, which was released in 1972, Escape Attempts, which was published in 1976, and Prison Secrets, which was released in 1978. Mr. Cohen additionally published Visions of Social Control, Crime, Punishment and Classification, which was published in 1985. Durham Prison, which was a Category A prison for men and women at the time, was praised in 2001 by Her Majesty's Chief Inspector of Prisons for its progressive regime, integration of inmates, and falling levels of violence. However, in 2003 it was revealed that Durham had the highest suicide rate of all prisons in England. In 2004, a report by the Chief Inspector of Prisons criticised Durham for being severely overcrowded. The report highlighted the lack of education and work opportunities for inmates at the prison. In 2005, Durham's female high security wing, which housed 120 female prisoners, was discontinued and the prisoners were transferred elsewhere after Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Prisons had made a report which concluded, following several suicides, that it was unsuitable for housing female prisoners. On the 13th of July 2011, it was announced that along with several other prisons, HMP Durham would be put up for market testing as part of the Ministry of Justice budget plan to make savings of almost 25%. A 2014 report by the HM Inspector of Prisons found that a third of inmates tested positive for drug use, a rate almost twice as high as would have been expected in similar prisons. Rates of violence were also higher than expected, which indicated that monitoring should be improved. The prison was, however, praised for the quality of work, activity and learning available to prisoners. Durham is currently a reception prison for remanded adults or young male prisoners. HMP Durham primarily serves the courts of County Durham, Tyne and Wear, Teesside and Cumbria. The prison is divided into the 7 wings, secure units, plus a segregation section and a healthcare section. The prison offers part-time education to all inmates, including courses on data input, bricklaying, woodwork, painting and decorating, waste management and gardening. Many notorious UK criminals have spent time at HMP Durham. Figures like Rose West, Ian Brady and Ronnie Crane have all walked its wings over the decades. The prison's head of residence and safety, Chris Carson, recently said to a local newspaper that the reality is, a lot of time, prison is quite a quiet and boring place. It's not the type of boisterous environment you see in the media where there is constantly violence and drugs going on. Generally, people are just trying to get on with their lives and sort out their problems. HMP Durham is no longer a high security facility. HMP Durham now operates as a reception prison, a sort of holding place for prisoners who are serving short terms or waiting for court appearances, or prisoners who are bound for other jails elsewhere in the country. Mr. Carson went on to explain, "There's a huge churn of prisoners, with more than half coming and going every month, and individuals ranging from cooperative and remorseful to very violent and disruptive. It's a melting pot of people. Some people are only serving a few weeks for relatively minor offences, and then some people are killers waiting to find out where they'll spend the rest of their lives in jail." Mr. Carson went on to explain, "For the prison officers who spend their working life locked up with them, the relationships with the men they guard can run much deeper than you think. There are definitely prisoners you see a lot of, and you're like, I want the best for them," Mr. Carson said. The prison officers try to develop good relationships and rapports with the men. Many people inside the jail do not have a chance to have conversations on a certain level when they are on the outside. In Mr. Carson's opinion, prison is a safe place to talk about problems that might be hard to talk about because of being macho on the outside. They may not want to show weakness. We can break them barriers down in prison. Following an inspection in 2018, a third of prisoners said they had developed a drug problem while at the prison, and said that drugs at HMP Durham were easy to get access to. When asked about the drug problem at HMP Durham, Mr. Carson said that tackling the drug problem takes up a huge amount of the prison's time and resources. "We spend a lot of time working with the police and search team to cut it out. New technological equipment is being used to clamp down on it too. We are more aware of the drug problem than we used to be, and that means we're doing better at dealing with them. The report also found an alarmingly high level of violence, self-inflicted deaths and self-harm at HMP Durham. The security chief said that a big part of making sure the prison remains safe is keeping its inmates calm. To reduce frustration, there are opportunities for prisoners to work, take classes and spend up to an hour every day going outside. They can also go to the gym or attend religious services at the chapel. He also added, "We offer a regime to try and reduce frustration within the prison. That's the best way of tackling violence. We do things to intervene and try and help people who come in with that sort of mental state." When arriving at HMP Durham, you will spend your first week on E-Wing, which is known as the first night and induction unit. Whilst on the induction wing, you are usually offered a smoking pack or a food pack, and you will spend a week on the wing watching videos to understand the rules of prison and how everything works. After you've spent your time on the induction wing, you will then be allocated to the general population of the prison. There are 4 wings which have the general population in HMP Durham: A wing, B wing, C wing and D wing. Prisoners who come in for high risk crimes or have problems with other prisoners are usually sent to the VP wing. In HMP Durham, F wing is the vulnerable prisoners unit. Prisoners who are on the VP wing generally get to have their own education time, their own gym time, they eat at different times, and they move around in the prison at completely different times. In HMP Durham is an integrated support unit with 17 beds for those with significant mental health problems. G wing is a segregation unit and a hospital unit which has 6 beds. As we mentioned earlier, HMP Durham has, since May 2017, been designated as a reception prison. At the time of the inspection in 2018, there were some 900 prisoners being held there, of which around 70% were either on remand or subject to recall. The prison itself dates back from the early 19th century and is located close to the centre of the city. Although the establishment was no longer designated as a local prison, it inevitably shared many of the features of other local prisons, and indeed faced many of the same challenges. This was clearly reflected in the findings of the inspection, where the prevalence of illicit drugs and high number of self-inflicted deaths, as well as high levels of violence and self-harm, and to top it all off, the influx of large numbers of new staff, all featured prominently. The overriding concern of the report was around the lack of safety in the prison. Since the last inspection in October 2016, there have been 7 self-inflicted deaths, and it was disappointing to see that the response to the recommendation from the Prisons and Probation Ombudsman, or PPO, has not been addressed with significant vigour or urgency. There has also been further 5 deaths in the space of 8 months, where it was suspected that illicit drugs may have played a part in the role. The ready availability of drugs in the prison was brought out in the inspector's report. Nearly 2/3 of prisoners told the inspectors that it was easy to get drugs, and 30% told the inspectors that they had acquired a drug habit since coming into HMP Durham. These were very high figures. The prison was well aware of the dangers posed by drugs and had developed a strategy to address the problem. However, the leadership of the prison was immensely frustrated by the fact they had no modern technology available to them to help them in their efforts to stem the flow of drugs into the prison. The inspectors had been told that they were promised some modern scanning equipment, but that equipment had been diverted to another prison. The scale of the problem at HMP Durham is very obvious, and the obvious linkage to all kinds of violence were such that the inspectors suggested that technological support was urgently needed. Since the 2016 inspection, violence in the prison has doubled and the use of force by staff has increased threefold. The reason given for staff increasing the use of force may have been down to new staff who were not yet confident in using de-escalation techniques. When the inspectors visited the prison, they said that it was reassuring to see that the governance of use of force had improved, and that the measures being taken to log and analyse the violence looked very promising. There were some very early signs that the level of violence was beginning to decline, but it was too early to be demonstrable as a sustainable trend or to affect our judgment that HMP Durham and its safety is very poor. Another serious concern brought up by the inspectors was that some 10% of the prisoners were assessed as presenting a high risk of harm to others, yet many of these were being managed by uniform offender supervisors who had neither the training, experience or adequate supervision to deal with this type of prisoner. The recent appointment of a senior probation officer will, the inspectors hope, reduce the risk posed by what the inspectors regarded as a significant vulnerability. The inspectors did have some positive things to say about the prison. The introduction of in-cell telephones and electronic kiosks on the wing for prisoners to make applications had undoubtedly been very beneficial. The disruption caused by prisoners needing to be taken to court had been reduced by the extensive use of video links. A new and more practical regime had recently been introduced, which was well received by staff and prisoners alike, increasing access to amenities such as showers and laundries on the wings. For a prison of this type, the time out of cell enjoyed by prisoners was reasonable, and it was quite apparent that, despite its age, the prison was basically clean and decent. It was also good to see that the leadership of the prison clearly regarded the influx of new staff as an opportunity to make improvements and not, as we have seen in a few prisons, an inexperienced liability. There was no doubt that there was an extent to which HMP Durham was still going through the process of defining, refining and responding to its role as a reception prison. The very large amount of prisoners coming in and out gave rise to the risk that taking them through the necessary processes could predominate over identifying individual needs and ensuring favourable outcomes. However, the prison was aware of this risk. The most pressing needs are to get to grips with the violence of all kinds, make the prison safer, and reduce the flow of drugs. Only then will the benefits flow from the many credible initiatives which are being implemented. The number one governor of HMP Durham is Philip Husband, who has been in charge of the jail since August 2018. What are your opinions on HMP Durham? Have you or anyone that you know been to HMP Durham? What were your opinions of the jail? Also, what are your opinions on the Chief Inspector of Jails report? Do you agree that HMP Durham does need technological assistance in its battle against the drug problem that it has? Please let us know in the comments below. Thank you for joining us today. If you enjoyed this content, please don't forget to like and share. And if you're new to the channel and you'd like to see more Street Crime UK content, please don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell button so you can join us on the next video. Thank you for joining us, and until next time, stay safe.
Hello and welcome to the Street Crime UK YouTube channel. Please don't forget to like, share, comment and subscribe. Today we're taking a look at Her Majesty's Prison and Young Offenders Institution, Forest Bank. Forest Bank is a Category B men's private prison in the Agecroft area of Pendlebury in Salford near Manchester, England. The prison is operated by Sodexo Justice Services. Forest Bank Prison was constructed on the site of the former Agecroft Power Station. The 25-year design, construct, manage and finance or DCMF contract was won by KLAX, formerly UKDS, in 1997, and it opened in January 2000. In November 2002, a report from Her Majesty's Chief Inspector of Prisons praised Forest Bank for its staff-prisoner relations, management structure, increased staffing levels and levels of association between inmates. However, the report also noted that many of the prison staff at Forest Bank lacked experience and there was insufficient purposeful activity, with fewer than half of the prisoners engaged in meaningful work or education. In 2004, it emerged that a prison officer at Forest Bank had been caught trying to sell heroin to inmates. The officer was caught with 147 wraps of the drug hidden inside his shoes when he started his shift. The officer was jailed for the offence. In March 2005, an inmate escaped from Forest Bank whilst being taken to hospital in a taxi. The prisoner was handcuffed to two prison officers as they travelled from the prison to the nearby Hope Hospital, when the taxi was stopped by two men who threatened the guards with a gun, forcing them to let the inmate free. In December of the same year, the prison was severely criticised by the Chief Inspector of Prisons for high levels of violence and drug taking amongst inmates. The inspection found that in 1 month alone, more than 2 kilograms of cannabis, 60 grams of heroin, and 4.6 grams of cocaine were found at Forest Bank, and 40% of the compulsory drug tests were positive. The report also found a significant deterioration in safety for staff and inmates at the prison, with routine intimidation of staff, prisoner assault on other prisoners running at 25 a month, and staff turnover of 25% a year. There had also been 2,500 prisoner discipline hearings in 6 months. In February 2006, another inmate escaped from Forest Bank whilst visiting hospital. The prisoner managed to escape from 2 prison guards and fled from the Manchester Royal Infirmary wearing only a surgical gown. In May 2010, another inmate, Michael O'Donnell, escaped from Forest Bank. The inmate cut off a section of his own ear in order to regain release from the facility in an ambulance. The ambulance was then stopped on Agecroft Road, or A6044, by a gang of armed men who released Mr. O'Donnell and made off. Mr. O'Donnell was recaptured on the 28th of May 2010. He was sentenced to 9.5 years on the 29th of May 2010 and was sent to Her Majesty's Prison Strangeways. He was found hanged in his cell on Wednesday the 23rd of June 2010. In November 2010, Her Majesty's Chief Inspector of Prisons, Nick Hardwick, noted in his report on the prison that some young inmates had been tied up in their bed linen and beaten by other prisoners. The report also acknowledged that in other matters there were many signs of improvements. On the 10th of February 2011, former Forest Bank prison nurse Leanne Cartledge, 23, was sentenced to 4 months in prison for taking a mobile phone into the prison to give to Michael O'Donnell, with whom she was in a relationship, and which he used to help his escape. In 2011, it emerged that 3 former members of staff at Forest Bank successfully sued Calix for unfair dismissal and their treatment by the serving Deputy Director of the prison. Also in 2011, Calix changed their name for the second time, becoming known as Sodexo Justice Services. A 2013 report from the Chief Inspector of Prisons noted that there was a need for more work, education and training to be made available, with over 40% of prisoners locked up doing nothing during the working day. Since the inspection in 2010, there had been some deterioration in the quality of activity and learning and skills provided. Her Majesty's Prison Forest Bank is a Category B local prison, although the majority of the inmates are Category C. The term local means that this prison holds more people on remand to the local courts as well as sentenced prisoners. Adult inmates at Forest Bank come from the courts at Wigan, Leigh, Bolton and Bury. Young offenders come from courts at Manchester, Oldham, Stockport, Trafford, Tameside, Rochdale and High Peak. The prison is divided into 8 wings, A to H, a healthcare unit and a care separation unit. Accommodation at the prison consists mostly of single cells with some double cells. All the cells are designed to be safer, having almost no ligature points due to the fact that modularisation was being used in the method of construction. Activities in the prison include production workshops, training workshops and vocational training courses in motor mechanics, industrial cleaning, catering and welding. There is a visits hall at Forest Bank with facilities including a WRVS-run canteen. On the 29th of January 2017, a prisoner was found dead in his cell after a suspected drug overdose. The inmate is believed to have taken the potent synthetic drug Spice before becoming ill. The prison opened in 2000 under a 25-year Private Finance Initiative, or PFI, contract to provide 800 places as a Category B local prison. Spaces gradually increased to 1,160 before a 264-place extension was opened in November 2009. Following a reduction in prisoner places, the establishment now holds 1,364 remand and sentenced adult males, and remanded young adults 18 to 21-year-old. Wings A to F are the original prison, and G to H are the new building added in 2009. The wings hold the following: A1 young adults, A2, B1, B2 and C1 are general, C2, D1 and D2 are vulnerable prisoners, E1 is the first night induction wing, and E2, F1 and F2 are general. G1 is a recovery wing, G2 is resettlement, H1 is a first night IS-MS unit, H2 is IS-MS motivational unit, healthcare and inpatients, it's only 19 beds. In healthcare, the prison has a 20-bed inpatient facility incorporating 2 4-bed wards and a 2-bed observation suite. The GP service is provided by Cimarron, a GP agency, and the healthcare team are employed by Sodexo with a 70-30 split between the general and psychiatric nurses. There is also a substance misuse, a range of services offered to support and assist prisoners with substance misuse issues. Education at the prison is unsurprisingly run by Sodexo. There are over 200 jobs available at the workshops and 180 education places. Courses offered in education focus on the basic education such as numeracy and literacy. It is possible to acquire nationally recognised qualifications in food preparation and cooking, RIPH Foundation Food Hygiene, and a BICS British Institute of Cleaning Service, HACCP Foundation Certificate, Skills for Life, and Competency in Silver Service Techniques. The prison was given an inspection in May 2019, and the full report can be read at the Ministry of Justice website. In the latest report, inspectors said that Forest Bank is a Category B local prison in Salford, with an operational capacity of 1,460. Soon to be designated a reception prison, Forest Bank's main function is to serve the local courts and receive newly remanded or newly convicted prisoners from the community. As such, the prison holds the full range and type of prisoners with all the risks and challenges it implies. Opening in 2000, the prison is relatively modern and has for the last 19 years been managed by the private operator Sodexo. Forest Bank was the last inspected in 2016 when we found a well-led, competent and confident prison that was ensuring reasonably good or better outcomes against all 4 of our healthy prison tests. Reception and induction arrangements were adequate and functional, although undermined by some tardy processes. Technology that had been acquired to improve security on reception was underused, and the whole early days experience was something of a missed opportunity, which would have been benefited from more management attention and grit. A third of prisoners told us they felt unsafe, a situation which was even worse among vulnerable prisoners, where there was a finding of 52%. Violence had more than doubled since our last inspection in 2016, and much of it was serious. Structures were also in place to analyse and combat the problem, and there were interventions to confront perpetrators, but actions were not always followed up to a conclusion, and low-level antisocial behaviour was not addressed sufficiently. There needed to be greater focus on coordination to address violence, by, for example, incentivising good behaviour and consistently holding to account those who behave poorly. Use of force was more prevalent, and at a level now comparable with similar prisons. Incidents were properly recorded in documentation, although oversight was lacklustre and limited use was made of body-worn camera footage. Use of segregation had also risen, and it was now too comparable to similar prisons. Cellular accommodation in the segregation unit required improvement, as did the very basic regime and reintegration arrangements. Security generally was applied proportionately, and we identified the management and use of intelligence as a strength of the establishment. Close working relationships with local police and robust staff anti-corruption arrangements were also in place. Many prisoners suggested to us that access to drugs was comparatively easy, although while still too high, positive mandatory drug tests of about 15% was lower than at most similar prisons. Self-harm had increased significantly since we last inspected, and was much higher than we expected to see. There had also sadly been one self-inflicted death. The prison had access to good data concerning the problem of self-harm, and recommendations made by the Prison and Probation Ombudsman, who investigated the death, were being implemented. Relationships between staff and prisoners were respectful and polite. However, we were concerned that staff, many of whom were very inexperienced, did not assert sufficient authority when supervising prisoners, with the danger that some prison groups were able to take advantage. Most prisoners were positive about most aspects of daily life at Forest Bank. For example, the food and good access to the shop and accommodation was generally clean and bright. However, 60% of cells were doubled up and therefore overcrowded, and much furniture and cell equipment was damaged or missing. We also saw some cells with broken windows, and there was some evidence of delays in responding to cell call bells. Diversity and equality was promoted reasonably well through a comprehensive action plan and helpful consultation, including innovative one-to-one surgeries for prisoners with protected characteristics. Health services had improved since the last inspection, although more improvements were still needed to make the inpatient facility a fully therapeutic environment. Time out of cell was better than we often see, and the daily routine, including access to evening association, was reliable, although nearly half the population was locked up during the working day. There were sufficient places in work and education for all, and attendance, if not punctuality, were good. We were not confident, however, that allocation to some wing roles was always equitable or fair. Our colleagues in Ofsted judged that the overall effectiveness of education, skills and work as good, a not insignificant achievement in a local prison. Assessment or OA-SYS systems and sentence management were reasonably good, and public protection arrangements robust, with the prison's whole approach to resettlement supported by a strong community link. Support for family ties and engagement was similarly very positive. Forest Bank continued to be a reasonably well-ordered and settled prison, delivering a generally good outcome. Prisoners could, for example, access a better regime than we normally see for this type of prison. Rehabilitation and resettlement work was consistently a strength. Overall, this is an encouraging report, although we do identify more work to do in safety and providing support to staff. We left the prison with a number of recommendations which we hope will assist in the process of improvement. Now, we're going to look at 2 arrested amid police investigations into a prison throwover at Manchester. Parcels launched over prison walls often contain drugs, mobile phones and knives, detectives say. Police have seized 2 parcels filled with suspected contraband and arrested 2 men aged 33 and 19 on suspicion of conspiracy to convey articles into prison. Dawn raids were carried out at 2 addresses in Salford on Friday, according to Greater Manchester Police, with specialist sniffer dogs deployed in subsequent searches. Officers said the warrants they used related to an operation carried out by the force's new Challenger prison team as part of a wider investigation into links between organised crime groups and the 4 prisons within Greater Manchester: Forest Bank, Buckley Hall, Hindley and Manchester. Detectives said that they believed the parcels were ready to be thrown over the walls at Forest Bank in Agecroft, Salford. GMP also offers that on Thursday night, coordinated searches were carried out inside Forest Bank by prison officers, leading to a number of mobile phones being seized, which the force said initial intelligence suggested were linked to an ongoing investigation. Today's activity has resulted in 2 arrests and a number of significant seizures, which will be forensically examined as part of this investigation, Detective Inspector Jack Murphy said. The new Challenger prison team are dedicated to relentlessly pursuing any individuals involved in these throwovers, both inside and outside the Greater Manchester prison system. He added that the parcels often contain drugs, mobile phones, steroids, tobacco, paper soaked in spice, cannabis and even knives, and sometimes that these items are sold for 5 times their standard price inside of prisons, and that they can make the prison very unsafe. It can promote gang culture and can lead to further crimes being committed by inmates, while also posing a serious risk to the safety of prison staff and prisoners, and lining the pockets of organised crime groups, D.I. Murphy said. David Smart, the Deputy Director at Forest Bank, said that organised crime has a negative effect on the safety and security of the staff and residents at Forest Bank, and we are proud of our partnership with the Challenger prison team in making our prison and community we serve a safer place to be. Now we're going to look at 2 prison officers who were attacked by a gang of masked men armed with baseball bats after finishing work at prison in Salford, Manchester. One officer was hit on the arm and another managed to jump out of the way as the gang crashed a car through a barrier and attempted to mow them down. The men also smashed windows of the visitor centre at HMP Forest Bank in Agecroft before fleeing. The incident happened recently, but only now the details have emerged. The prison understands that one line of inquiry is that the attack may have been revenge for an inmate being moved out of the prison after allegedly assaulting a female prison officer who was knocked out. A spokesperson for HMP Forest Bank said that an incident occurred outside Forest Bank on Tuesday the 20th of July where 2 prison officers were attacked by masked men. A member of staff did sustain an injury from the attack, and the incident has been referred to the Greater Manchester Police. In a statement, Greater Manchester Police said, "Police were called shortly after 8 PM on Tuesday the 20th of July 2021 to reports of a disturbance at HMP Forest Bank. Inquiries have established that 3 people arrived at the prison in a dark-coloured car before alighting the vehicle and attacking a staff member with a baseball bat. The offenders then attempted to run over a second member of staff using the car before driving through the barrier and causing extensive damage to the visitors' entrance. The member of staff who was attacked with a baseball bat was taken to hospital with an arm injury. He has since been discharged. No arrests have been made and inquiries remain ongoing. So what are your thoughts on Her Majesty's Prison and Young Offenders Institution Forest Bank? Are there any stories we missed? Please let us know what you think in the comments below. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, stay safe. Hello and welcome to the Street Crime UK YouTube channel. Please don't forget to like, share, comment and subscribe. Today we're looking at HM Prison Hollesley Bay. HM Prison Hollesley Bay, known locally as Hollesley Bay Colony, to which signposts still point, or simply the Colony, is a Category D men's prison and young offender institution located in the village of Hollesley, about 8 miles from the town of Woodbridge in Suffolk, England. The prison is operated by Her Majesty's Prison Service. Hollesley Bay began in 1887 as a colonial college training those intending to emigrate. The land was originally purchased by Joseph Fells, an American soap manufacturing millionaire, and friend of George Lansbury, the prominent Christian socialist who was also a leading member of the Popular Board of Guardians. In 1905, Fells transferred the land to the London Unemployed Fund, who in turn handed it over to the Central Unemployed Body for London. Subsequently, it was taken over by London County Council. There were a number of similar labour colonies across Britain. Their aim was to train unemployed people for work, with a view to helping them escape poverty. Hollesley Bay was typical in that it mainly involved exposing its inmates to a period of work either on agricultural tasks or in the kitchens and other relatively unskilled activities. There was a short-lived strike among the inmates in May 1922, partly sparked by dissatisfaction over the inmates' levels of pay. It was said to hold around 280 men in 1923, rising to 366 in the late 1920s, and falling to around 200 in 1934. In 1938, the Prison Commission purchased the site for use as a borstal and detention centre. The Irish writer Brendan Behan, arrested for IRA activities in 1939, was sent there, and subsequently described his experiences in Borstal Boy. A major expansion took place in 1982 with the opening of Warren Hill Prison, a 285-place secure unit. In 1983, Hollesley Bay became a youth custody centre. This replaced the Borstal system. In 2002, the old Borstal site became mainly for the use of minimum security adult offenders. And since 2002, the prison has been repeatedly criticised for apparently large numbers of escapes, which has led to the nickname Holiday Bay. Hollesley Bay did have the largest prison farm in the British prison system, along with the oldest established stud for the Suffolk Punch horse in the world. Hollesley Bay Prison today holds Category D adult male prisoners, Category D male young offenders, and male life sentence prisoners at the parole board's discretion. Accommodation at the prison comprises 8 residential units. There are Hoxton, Stowe, Bosmere, Cosford, Wilford, Blything, Samford and Mutford, most of which have single occupancy rooms. There are double occupancy rooms on Hoxton and Cosford. The prison offers part-time education classes to inmates through A4E. Subjects include literacy, numeracy, ESOL, music, information technology, cookery, graphic design, and the Community Sports Leader Award. The gym operates during evenings and weekends, offering a range of sporting activities. There are full-time accredited vocational training courses in building operations, plumbing, motor mechanics, plastering, bricklaying and painting and decorating. Adult inmates are also offered work in the prison's kitchen, gardens, cleaning, laundry orderlies, staff mess, contract services, resettlement department, reception, education department, clothing exchange store and the transport department. Wages range from £14 per week to £25 per week for drivers in the transport department. 100 inmates currently work outside the prison, either in community work or training or paid work. Borstal Boy, a 1958 autobiographical novel by Brendan Behan, recounts his imprisonment at Hollesley Bay. The novel was subsequently turned into a play adapted by Frank McMahon, and a film directed by Peter Sheridan starring Sean Hattersey and Danny Dyer. In the epilogue of the third volume of his A Prison Diary, Jeffrey Archer writes about his stay at the Hollesley Bay after his transfer from HMP Lincoln. HMP Hollesley Bay was developed as a borstal in 1938, on the site of a former colonial college with extensive farmlands whose original buildings dated 1887, now house much of the administration centre. Hollesley Bay Open Prison for adults mainly was formerly separated from the adjacent HMYOI Warren Hill, which is now a closed establishment holding a solely juvenile population. There are 9 residential units, Blything, a 42-bed unit holding prisoners on their first night and during induction. It also contains medical use rooms for residents who need in-room toilets. Hoxton, an 82-bed normal location residential unit. Stowe, a 76-bed unit normal location residential unit. Bosmere, an 80-bed normal location residential unit. Wilford, a 72-bed normal location residential unit, also holds prisoners with disabilities. Samford, a 15-bed unit holding prisoners over the age of 50. Threadling, a self-contained bungalow for long-term prisoners preparing for release. Cosford, a 72-bed normal location residential unit. And Mutford, a 43-bed unit housing most of the paid workers and other outworkers. Hollesley Bay will occasionally accept prisoners on the Integrated Drug Treatment System, or IDTS, subject to prior agreement with their healthcare staff. Courses and programs are on the rehabilitation and treatment, education and counselling, including attending volunteer groups. The approach taken to illegal drug usage at Hollesley Bay is one of teamwork centred on care for the abuser's health and the encouragement of ending the abuse. The prison works with Care UK and the RAPT organisation to provide help, guidance and counselling in support of the addicted prisoner. In resettlement, prisoners have access to a job club and virtual campus and a web-based information service that allows them to seek for jobs anywhere within the UK. In common with all prisons, prisoners do not have access to the real internet. The prison actively supports the use of ROTL, release on temporary licence, to help the prisoner reintegrate with life outside the prison environment. Prisoners within their last year or before release are able to source paid work within a 40-mile radius of Hollesley Bay, subject to various rules regarding the suitability of the job, e.g. not bar work. All medical and dental care is delivered by Care UK. There is on-site nursing cover from 7:30 AM until 5 PM, Monday to Friday, and 7:30 AM until 2 PM on Saturday and Sunday. A doctor's surgery is scheduled 6 days a week. There are no inpatient facilities and the nearest NHS hospital is 15 miles away in Ipswich. The chaplaincy team delivers services for COE, Catholics and Muslims at the appropriate times on a weekly basis. Provision is made for other faiths via visiting ministers. The gymnasium operates during the day, delivering qualifications at level 1 and 2, including healthy living, fitness instructor, circuit training and first aid at work defibrillator training. The education provider is A4E and they provide courses in plastering, bricklaying, painting and decorating for which nationally recognised qualifications can be achieved. They also offer part-time education in literacy, numeracy and ITQ. The prison was inspected on late 2018 and a full report can be read at the Ministry of Justice site. In his latest report, the inspector said that HMP and YOA Hollesley Bay is an open prison in Suffolk holding up to 485 adult prisoners. Many of those held are serving relatively long sentences of more than 4 years, with just over 100 serving over 10 years or life. Those held have been convicted of a range of offences, although more than 100 were violent offenders. At the time we inspected, the prison was making plans to begin holding sex offenders, although there was much more work to do concerning this proposal. We last inspected the prison in 2014, when we reported on an impressive institution. Following this inspection, we can report that the prison continued to deliver good or reasonably good outcomes for those detained. Hollesley Bay was a very safe prison. Those arriving were received well into the prison, and in our survey, most prisoners indicated that they felt safe. Violence was relatively rare, and informal structures of support for those who were vulnerable or at risk were good. The application of security was proportionate, although there had been a disappointing increase in the use of drugs. Strategies were in place to address this concern, and self-harm incidents remained infrequent, but support for those who needed it was actually effective. The prison was an overwhelmingly respectful place, underpinned by some very supportive staff-prisoner relationships. That said, there was evidence of a strong undercurrent of prisoners who felt intimidated by staff and feared that they could be arbitrarily returned to closed conditions. This was a perception that the prison needed to do more to understand and remedy. Extensive use of peer supporters was undermined by a lack of clarity concerning some of their roles and some indifferent training. General consultation with prisoners was lacklustre. Accommodation was generally good, but the Bosmere unit needed further refurbishment. The grounds were well maintained and accessible, and the promotion of equality was weak, but evidence suggested most outcomes among those with protected characteristics were equatable. Accreditation in prison industries and structured careers advice was less well developed. ROTL was used extensively to support work, resettlement and family ties. The prison's approach to reducing reoffending was reasonable, although the analysis of need to support the targeting of resettlement work and the prison's improvement action plan were too limited. The integration of offender management with the wider establishment was, however, weaker. Of concern, and in contrast to much that was happening in the prison, public protection work was not good enough. We have made this very significant failing the subject of one of our main recommendations. Reintegration planning for those approaching release was better. Hollesley Bay remained a successful and effective prison, experiencing a time of change, with a new governor about to be appointed and plans to develop the prison's role to hold sex offenders. We leave the prison with several recommendations which we hope assist further improvement. A prisoner smuggled an alleged prostitute into his cell at an open jail in Suffolk and shared images of her half naked on his bed, reports claim. The inmate who was serving time at HMP Hollesley Bay for drug offences reportedly took photographs of the scantily dressed woman whilst inside the prison. According to The Sun, bosses at the Woodbridge institution are investigating the breach, while police attempt to track down the unidentified woman. It is understood the prisoner has been moved into a closed prison, and Hollesley Bay's perimeter fencing is being reviewed. An insider said, "It shows what a joke the security is there. You've got a serving prisoner bringing a girl into the jail, then bragging about it on illegal mobiles to all his mates. Apart from that, the girl put herself at serious risk of harm. She went into a prison full of sex-starved men, some of them serving time for violent and sexual offences. She could have easily been attacked before staff knew she was even there." The source added that the woman isn't believed to be the inmate's girlfriend, adding, "What self-respecting girlfriend is going to risk their safety to see the other half when they're nearly at the release point anyway?"
Hello and welcome to the Street Crime UK YouTube channel. Please don't forget to like, share, comment and subscribe. Today we're going to take an in-depth look into the HM Prison ISIS. HM Prison ISIS is a Category C male young offenders institution located in the Thamesmead area of the Royal Borough of Greenwich in South East London, England. ISIS Prison is operated by Her Majesty's Prison Service and is situated next to Belmarsh Prison and Tameside Prison. In May 2009, the Ministry of Justice awarded Interserve a £110 million contract to design and construct a new prison called ISIS on underused land within the perimeter wall of Belmarsh Prison. The new prison was built to Category B standards. In August 2009, the construction site of the new prison was evacuated after contractors discovered a suspected World War II bomb. ISIS prison is located on the site of the former Royal Arsenal, and the suspected bomb was found to be an empty shell casing. Interserve handed over the completed ISIS prison in April 2010, with the prison becoming operational soon after. In January 2012, an inspection report by Her Majesty's Chief Inspector of Prisons criticised the faulty technology which was being used at the prison. The report also found that the combination of new and transferred staff staff was causing problems in forming good staff-prisoner relations at the jail. However, the report praised the prisoners' resettlement services, low drug use, and support of prisoners at risk of self-harm. A month later, inmates at ISIS claimed that there was a significant gang culture developing in the prison. ISIS prison governor Graham Hawkins at the time admitted that gangs were a problem within the prison. As a young offenders institution and Cat C prison, ISIS holds male offenders from the age of 18. However, there is no maximum age. Accommodation comprises of mixture of single cells and double cells in 2 house blocks. The prison also has entry building and central activity centre, which houses a learning academy, segregation unit and PE academy. However, the prison does not have inpatient healthcare facilities. Education and vocational training at the prison is delivered in partnership with Kensington and Chelsea College. Courses include mechanics, which is a motorbike repair shop, construction, waste management, bicycle repair, barbering, catering, reprographics, broadcasting and media studies, ESOL, and drug-related studies. There is a visitor centre at the prison which is run by the Spurgeon charity. The visits complex consists of a main room, a supervised child play area, refreshment counter, and vending machines. HMP YOY ISIS is in the southeast of London and is the first bespoke establishment of its kind in the London region. Being a young adult and Category C training prison for young men and adults up to the age of 30, the prison was constructed within the perimeter of HMP Belmarsh and received its first prisoners on the 26th of July 2010. The prison is the first whole-built public sector prison to be built in the last 20 years. In December 2016, the age cap of 18 to 30 was lifted, allowing all prisoners of all ages to be transferred to the jail. 2 house blocks, Thames and Meridian, both have 4 spurs, radiating from a central hub within 3 landings on each spur. On average, there is accommodation for about 80 prisoners on each spur in a mixture of single and double cells. There are also a few fully equipped cells for prisoners with disabilities. The prison has a broad-based curriculum that supports academic achievement, vocational training, interventions and PE activities. The interventions program is subject to offenders' needs. The regime is delivered in partnership with A4E. The healthcare is run by Care UK and there are no inpatient facilities. The prison was given an inspection in the summer of 2018. In their latest report, the inspectors said HMP YOO ISIS is a Category C training prison in the southeast London, which sits within the wall line of the high security Belmarsh prison. At the time of our inspection, the prison held just over 600 convicted prisoners. Almost 70% of the population were under 30 and 22% were under 21 years old. Almost half of those were serving over 4 years. Our last inspection of the prison in 2016 was disappointing. At the time, we recorded insufficient progress and a failure to attend to deliver some of the basic services. We were particularly critical of a restricted regime first put in place in 2013, which is still in operation when we inspected 3 years later. Restrictions persisted, but reassuringly, improvements had been made and the average number of prisoners locked up during the working day had reduced to 22% of the population compared to 40% last time we visited. Prisoners also had better access to domestic activities and association time, which included evening association for those on an enhanced wing. Prison again talked about plans to introduce and improve the regime, although at this inspection the plans seemed more credible as staffing numbers had improved significantly. The current governor took up the post shortly after our last inspection and had clearly prioritised getting the basics right, with visible leadership evident and a more positive culture beginning to emerge. The prison had been authorised to conduct a local recruitment campaign to recruit prison officers, instead of relying on the usual national campaign which sometimes displaced people from their home areas and created long commutes. The governor believed that this local recruitment had enabled her to appoint a team of officers more committed to the aims of her establishment. The influx of new staff clearly brought its own challenges, with 80% of the staff group still in their first year of service, but the governor commendably saw this as a long-term opportunity for the prison and not a hindrance. Similar to the other prisoners holding significant numbers of young people, levels of violence at HMP YOI ISIS had increased and were very high. 1 in 4 prisoners in our survey reported feeling unsafe but the senior team had introduced a number of initiatives aimed at reducing violence and encouraging good behaviour. The quality of investigations of violence incidents had improved significantly. Systems to identify and deal with gang activity were well managed, and relationships with local police were very good. Additionally, the governor was clearly focused on tackling any potential staff corruption. New behaviour management processes designed to deal with people with the most complex individuals were promising, although it was a little too early to see their benefits. Concerted effort had been made to encourage good behaviour, including the introduction of an enhanced unit, peer support roles, and opportunities for release on temporary licence, otherwise known as ROTL. All departments were working together to try and tackle the drug misuse problem. It was vital that this commendable initiative and effort was sustained. Our survey of those held was very negative around those two critical areas. Only 48% of the respondents said that most staff treated them with respect, and only 46% could say that they had not experienced any kind of victimization by staff. Important recent steps had been taken by the senior team to deal with staff who contributed to the negative experiences of prisoners, but more work was needed to understand and address these negative perceptions. Our own observations and discussions with the prisoners about staff, in contrast, were more positive. Indeed, we were encouraged by the energy and commitment of many staff we met. Most prisoners spoke about good officers that they could talk to if they needed help. Prison staff and managers had received hundreds of letters of thanks from prisoners that they had helped through difficult times. Living conditions had improved since our last inspection. Communal areas and most external areas were clean and well presented. Prisoners were encouraged to clean their cells, and there was little graffiti and few offensive pictures on display. The governor and a team of her staff also hosted regular think tank meetings with prisoners to discuss ways that they could improve conditions at the prison. However, our visit took place during the summer heat wave, and inspectors were struck by the oppressive heat in some cells that had no curtains or fans to lower the temperature. One of our most serious concerns was around the use of force, which we were not assured was always justified. We identified a need for more rigorous scrutiny of when and how to use force and how it was applied. When there had been a failure to turn on body-worn cameras, de-escalate incidents, or complete important assurance paperwork, governance arrangements did not robustly challenge this. Some of the youngest prisoners are often the most vulnerable, and yet they were disproportionately represented in the statistics relating to force and segregation. We were disappointed that very little had been done to achieve the main recommendation made at the last inspection concerning the prison's management of equality and diversity, and we have been compelled to make similar main recommendations in this report. The diverse population at the prison demands more flexibility in the application of policy to assure that the difference is recognised and understood. We were particularly concerned about the adverse outcomes for foreign national and young prisoners. The establishment needed to do more to understand the distinct needs of these groups on arrival at the prison and dedicate resources to ensuring that their needs were met. In the case of young prisoners, a greater understanding of the development needs of young people still going through the process of maturation was required. Prisoners still did not spend enough time in education or training, and those on vocational courses often did not have time to gain accredited qualifications. Poor attendance and punctuality contributed significantly to Ofsted's judgment that the overall effectiveness of education, skills and work required improvement. Prisoners were supported to build and maintain family ties, but a shortfall of offender assessment system, OASIS, assessments impacted prisoners' ability to progress through their sentence. Offender management and the quality of supervision were mixed, and there were weaknesses in public protection arrangements. Support for care leavers and resettlement planning were, however, better. Our assessments have remained largely unchanged since the last inspection. Although this was not the whole story, we noted an encouraging change in the direction since the appointment of the current governor, and the culture and atmosphere in the prison were definitely improving. We left the prison confident that the senior managers and staff would use our report to effect further positive change. particularly in those areas which caused us the most concern. This report was done by Peter Clark, CVO OBE QPM, on September 2018. A corrupt prison warden, who was 28 at the time, tried to smuggle 4 ounces of cannabis into the Young Offenders Institute in her bra to earn money to fund a Masters in Criminology. Safak Boskirk from Islington, North London, was paid £1,000 for each package that she delivered. She agreed to smuggle the contraband drugs into the prison in return for cash from the gang. Miss Boskirk said she wanted the cash to pay debts and to fund a degree in criminology. She received a 2-year suspended jail sentence after admitting smuggling. Safak Boskirk smuggled in cannabis, mobile phones, SIM cards, and charger cables into the Young Offenders Institution. She was caught by a sniffer dog as she went through the security at HMP YOY ISIS in Thamesmead in London. When strip searched on the 12th of July, staff found 4 ounces of cannabis stashed in her bra, along with 4 mobile phones, 18 SIM cards, and charging cables stuck in her waistband. The officers became suspicious about Miss Boskirk when they observed the way she was interacting with certain prisoners. She had become a prison officer in January 2015. Southwark Crown Court heard the 28-year-old mother of 2 was paid cash each time she delivered the contraband. She used the cash to pay off £32,000 in credit card debts and to fund a master's degree. Court heard that Miss Boskirk was paid the cash by a former inmate, Luke Powell, to bring the contraband in to Joshua Ogwell. Jane Carpenter, prosecuting, said, between March and July, prison officers working at the prison began to suspect that Miss Boskirk was behaving inappropriately towards prisoners whilst on duty. Staff then decided to conduct a staff search on Tuesday the 12th of July. On that day, the police received a phone call from the prison informing them that they had detained Miss Boskirk in the staff entrance. It was revealed in court that although Miss Boskirk had joined the prison system in 2015, she agreed several months later to begin smuggling contraband by the former prisoner, Luke Powell, who at the time was still on the run. When asked who it was for, she provided them with the name Joshua Ogwell. When she asked how much she was paid, she said £1,000. Miss Carpenter said that Miss Boskirk also told police that a former prisoner had paid her to bring the drugs in, and said that if he was arrested, he will be taken straight back in. Miss Boskirk's own mobile phone showed messages had been made between herself and people in D-Wing in the prison. Details within the messages were about the size of the packages and the fact that she did not want them to be too big. Miss Carpenter said that Miss Boskirk had admitted she had been dealing in the prison for several months and had been paid several £1,000s in cash. Whilst in prison, she had been approached by a prisoner who offered her cash to do the dirty work. She said she had no excuses and no pressure had been put on her. She saw it as an opportunity to make extra money and pay off her debts. She's doing a Masters in Criminology, studying why people commit crimes. She should probably teach the class. The potential prison value going on the amount of drugs that were found located in the prison was between 5,850 and 11,700 for the 117 grams of cannabis. Miss Carpenter added that the phones were worth between £500 and £1,000, while SIM cards could be rented to prisoners for as much as £50 a night. Graham Wilson, defending, said the defendant fully understands the seriousness of the offences which she faces. But Judge Martin Griffin interjected, I am not surprised. She is doing a Masters in Criminology, studying why people commit crimes, when really she could probably teach the class. Mr. Wilson continued, her first concern is not so much herself, but her 2 children aged 7 and 4. She had been approached by a prisoner at the time she was going through a very difficult breakup with her partner and father of her children. However, the judge said, people who work in the prison service must know, just as all of us who do not, that drugs inside prisons and phones inside prisons are entirely illegal. They give rise to all sorts of problems for prisons and officers who come under pressure to bring them in, such that the last thing you should have done was to give away to those items into the prison for money. That is even before I come to the fact that you are doing a Masters in Criminology. You must have been burning with embarrassment every time they talked about crime and the causes of crime, thinking, good grief, that's me, isn't it? Your barrister has said quite rightly, I should think about the children. But it seems to me that those are matters that you should have had in mind, rather than coming to court telling me that I should have them in mind. They had noticed that she was no longer wearing a ring, and they were also aware that she was in massive financial debt. At one stage, she broke down during the course of her employment, and that's when she was approached by a prisoner. Mr. Wilson said Miss Boskirt's ex-partner had raked up £32,000 in credit card debts in her name because he had a poor credit history. He added that if she was imprisoned, there was nobody to take care of the children. The likelihood is that they were going to care. Not only would they likely end up in social services care, they might actually be separated. Judge Griffiths said, all of which should have been at the forefront of her mind the first time she said, "You give me £1,000 and I will take contraband into my place of work." Mr. Wilson said, the temptation was overwhelming. The reason it reoccurred once it happened is those prisoners had her over a barrel. She was extremely vulnerable at the time, financially and mentally, because of the burdens of debt and the children as well as no support. She is extremely remorseful and she is ashamed. Judge Griffiths interrupted. Funnily enough, I was listening to Radio 4 this morning and the MP for Shipley was having the leader of the Women's Equality Party against him for termity for saying men and women should be treated equally before the law. If this was a man, what would you be saying? Nice mitigation. Thank you very much. Off you go. Mr. Wilson responded. If it was not for the children, I would not have a leg to stand on in terms of arguing for a suspended sentence, sparing Miss Boskert of immediate custodial sentence. Judge Griffiths said, people who work for the prison service, and all of us who do not, know that bringing drugs into prison is entirely illegal. They give rise to all sorts of problems for prisoners and officers who come under pressure to bringing them in, such that the last thing you should have done was to give way to those items into prisoners for money. That is even before I come to the fact that you were doing a master's in criminology. You must have been burning with embarrassment every time they talked about crime and the causes of crime, thinking, good grief, that's me, isn't it? Your barrister has quite rightly told me that I should think about the children, but it seems to me that those matters that you should have in mind, rather than coming to court and telling me that I should have them in mind. Miss Boskert admitted one count of conveying List Article A's into prison and one count of conveying List B articles into prison. She was sentenced to 2 years, suspended for 24 months, and ordered to undertake 300 hours of unpaid community work. Thank you for joining us today. What are your opinions of HMP YOY ISIS? Please let us know what you think in the comments below. Thank you for joining us today. If you enjoyed this content, please don't forget to like and share. And if you're new to the channel and you want to see more Street Crime UK content, hit subscribe and press that bell so you can join us on the next video. Thank you for joining us, and until next time, stay safe. Hello and welcome to the Street Crime UK YouTube channel. Please don't forget to like, share, comment and subscribe. Today we're going to take a look into the history of HM Prison Moorland. HM Prison Moorland, formerly HM Prison Moorland Closed, is a Category C men's prison and young offenders institution near Hatfield, Woodhouse in South Yorkshire, England. The prison is operated by Her Majesty's Prison Service and is jointly managed with the nearby Hatfield Prison. In March 2005, Moorland Prison was subjected to rioting when more than 40 inmates refused to return to their cells. It took 4 hours and the intervention of staff and officers from neighbouring institutions to quell the situation. In August 2006, a report from Her Majesty's Chief Inspector of Prisons stated that both Moorland and Hatfield prisons were well managed and provided a safe and respectful environment for inmates and staff. But the report also claimed that the regime at Moorland Prison was over punitive and under motivating. On the 14th of July 2011, it was announced that HMP and YOY Moorland would be put out to tender, accepting bids from private companies and the HM Prison Service for the management of the establishment. In 2011, Moorland Open Prison was renamed Hatfield Prison and Moorland Closed Prison was renamed Moorland Prison. In July 2011, it was announced that Moorland, along with several other publicly operated prisons, would be market tested, allowing private operators as well as HM Prison Service to tender for the contract to operate the prison. Moorland is a prison holding Category C adult males and young offenders. Prisoners are either released straight from Moorland or are transferred to Hatfield Prison. Accommodation at the prison is divided into 7 house blocks, with a total of 180 double cells and 614 single cells. House blocks 1, 2 and 5 and 6 are residential 1 prisoners, while house blocks 3 and 4, residential 2 prisoners, also known as VPs, are vulnerable prisoners. House block 7 houses elderly and disabled residential 2 prisoners. Offender behaving groups and enhanced thinking skill courses are offered to inmates at Moorland Prison, as well as the welfare to work programs and job clubs. There is also a listener scheme for any who may be at risk from suicide or self-harm, and community projects are also offered. Former notable inmates at the prison include Michael Barton, Adam Johnson, Jerez Kika, Sean Mercer, Jake Fiery and Jamal Boosba. HMP Moorland opened in 1991 with a remand and YOY function, containing the original house blocks 1 to 4. House block 5 opened in 1998 and house block 6 was added in 2011 and took the operating capacity up to 1006. In addition, 320 sex offenders from Yorkshire and Humberside region were received into Moorland and located to house blocks 3 and 4. In September 2002, HMP YOY Moorland merged with HMP YOY Hatfield with a shared governor and senior management team. In July 2011, it was announced that HMP YOY Moorland, along with its sister prison HMP YOY Hatfield, would be made subject to a market testing programme. It was placed into the South Yorkshire lot, which included HMP Lindome. The cluster was named HMP South Yorkshire and led by a single governor and a single management team, managing a population of some 2,200 prisoners. The decision to privatise the prisons was reversed in 2013 and the prison remained in public ownership run by HMPS. And in January 2014, HMP YOY Moorland reverted into being a single prison. HMP YOY Moorland has 6 residential house blocks holding a mixture of young adults and offenders. House block 1 is the substance misuse treatment wing. House block 2 is the first night centre. House blocks 3 and 4 are the prisoners convicted of sexual offences. House block 5 includes the reintegration unit. House block 6 is the drug-free environment. House block 7 is a unit for older prisoners and those with poor mobility, integrated general population and prisoners convicted of a sexual offence. Offender behaving groups include enhanced thinking skill courses, welfare to work and job clubs, and a listener scheme is also available. The prison runs 3 accredited offender behaviour programs. Thinking skills, which addresses the prisoners' cognitive skills, allowing them to look at the problem solving in relation to their offending behaviour and general life decisions. Calm, which is an anger management program addressing issues of emotional violence in relation to offender behaviour. Building skills for recovery, the replacement substance misuse program for PASRO.BSR addresses both drug and alcohol misuse and can be assessed by the alcohol misusers only. This program has been commissioned by Doncaster PCT as part of its recovery-based ethos. The prison offers a range of workshop placements including work experience in farms and gardens, furniture repair, industrial cleaners, kitchens, lights, painting and decorating, picture, plastic, stores, tailors, TV repairs, waste recycle, braille, CES, joinery and wire and stripping. Moorland has a modern gymnasium including 2 weight and cardiovascular gyms, a remedial gym area, a sports hall and an external football field, as well as many recreational gym sessions. They run full-time courses leading to vocational qualifications in a gym instructor level 2 MVQ, a circuit instructor level 1 and 2 MVQ, first aid work HSE approved, treatment of injuries level 2 and 3 QCA NQF, indoor cycling beginners credited towards MVQ, healthy living 1 and 2 credits towards MVQ. The prison has 3 workshops which are run by the education department, allowing prisoners to gain vital vocational qualifications in bricklaying in level 2 C Skills Award CAA, painting and decorating level 2 C Skills Award CAA, and bench joinery level 2 skills CAA. The education department is run by Manchester City College and offers a range of courses and qualifications. Function for skills in English, function for skills in mathematics, Skills for Life Adult Literacy, Skills for Life Adult Numeracy, ITQ, Certificate for Creative Techniques, Certificate for Creative Employability Skills, VT Hospitality and Catering Food and Beverages Services, Hospitality and Catering Professional Cookery, Hospitality and Catering Food Preparation and Cooking, Awards in Food Safety and Catering, Practical Horticultural Skills. The prison was inspected during February 2019, and in his report the inspector had this to say: HMP YOI Moorland is a Category C adult and young adult men's resettlement prison situated near Doncaster. It was last inspected on February 2016, at which time it was still adapting to having been re-rolled as a resettlement prison. There had also been a period of uncertainty prior to the last inspection as a result of the prison being embarked for privatisation, a plan which was subsequently abandoned. In 2016, the prison was also suffering very badly from an influx of illicit drugs, particularly new psychoactive substances, NPS. This was causing daily medical emergencies, and not enough was being done to stem the flow of drugs into the jail. At that time, it was also made clear to the inspection team that the staff felt the prison had been severely affected by the benchmarking process, leaving it desperately short of staff. It was therefore heartening to see the progress that had been made in the past 3 years. In 2016, 3 of our healthy prisons tests had been graded as not sufficiently good. In contrast, on this occasion, we have found 3 to be reasonably good, with increases in grading for safety and respect. Given the context in which prisons such as Moorland have been operating over the past few years, this is a significant achievement and testament to a huge amount of hard work by all the leaders and staff at Moorland. We found Moorland to be a very different prison to the one we inspected in 2016. Levels of violence had not only stabilised, but actually decreased, clearly bucking the national trend over that period. However, despite the fact that overall levels of violence had dropped, assaults against staff had doubled and were higher than in similar prisons. There is still more to do to deal with the violence, but the way in which it is now being analysed was positive, as was the support being offered to the victims. The use of force by staff had increased since the last inspection, and recording was generally good, although some aspects of governance needed to be improved. Along with the reduction in violence, it was also notable that the prevalence of NPS seen at the last inspection had increased. There was a comprehensive drug strategy and good work between security department and substance misuse. It was concerning that levels of self-harm were very high, and in light of this, it was disappointing that there were insufficient listeners. One of our main recommendations from this inspection is around the need to analyse, understand and respond to whatever lies behind the high levels of self-harm. Staff-prisoners relationships had improved considerably since the last inspection, and it was good to see that the key worker scheme was being implemented. It was clear that this was having a positive impact on relationships, as in every prison where we see it happening. The introduction of in-cell telephones was an important development and beneficial in many ways. However, there was much work to be done to understand the equality monitoring data that indicated some poorer outcomes for prisoners with protected characteristics. There was a need for more consultation and better involvement of community groups who worked in equality and diversity. Our survey indicated adverse results for black and minority ethnic prisoners, as well as disabled prisoners, and this needed to be understood. The reintegration unit was, in principle, a good initiative, with perfectly sensible aspirations to manage poor behaviour, incentivise good behaviour, and assist prisoners in locating back onto mainstream accommodation. However, at the time of the inspection, there was still much work to be done to realise the full potential of the unit, and a more meaningful regime needed to be introduced from the moment prisoners were first located onto the unit. The most serious concern we had was around the lack of effective public protection measures. The report gives detailed evidence on how these were lacking in too many ways, and it was unacceptable that high-risk prisoners approaching release were not receiving detailed consideration that their potential risk to the public should have demanded. Moorland has now been a resettlement prison for a number of years, and this whole area of responsibility, not only to the prisoners but also to the public, needs to be addressed as a matter of urgency. Overall, this was a very good inspection, although there were some vital areas where improvement was still needed. It was obvious that the findings of the last inspection had been taken seriously. Around 2/3 of our recommendations have been achieved, and this is more than we are used to seeing in recent times. I would urge the leadership
and staff at Moorland not to feel defences about some of the issues raised in this report, which some might interpret as criticism. It is the duty of the HM Inspector of Prisons to report on what we see, and if we see shortcomings, we will point them out, in the spirit of helping to secure further improvements through recommendations. This was a reassuring inspection and shows what can be achieved even in difficult times and testing times. But it would be unduly complacent not to acknowledge that further improvement is necessary and achievable. This report was made by Peter Clark, CVO OBE QPM, in April 2019. A married prison drugs worker who was 54 was spared jailed after her explicit chats on a phone with an inmate were exposed by guards routinely monitoring his calls. Tracy Story from Doncaster was a substance misuse worker at HMP Moorland. The 54-year-old was caught having inappropriate chats with prisoner Nicholas Millward. She admitted to one count of willful misconduct in a public office in lower courts. Miss Story was sentenced to 3 months suspended at Sheffield Crown Court. The substance misuse worker, Tracy Story, had an inappropriate relationship with the prisoner Nicholas Millward at HMP Moorland in Doncaster, South Yorkshire. The married prison worker was busted for having inappropriate chats with an inmate after the guards recognised her voice whilst monitoring the prison's calls. The staff were monitoring the prisoner's calls as a matter of routine when they recognised a member of staff's voice. Prosecutor Michael Jones told Sheffield Crown Court that Miss Story was suspended from duty in the prison's healthcare department and, whilst being escorted from the prison, said, "I have been dreading this day, and I have been waiting for this moment." Miss Story's manager became concerned after their meetings took longer than usual, and Miss Story unusually met Mr. Millward in reception after his transfer from HMP Doncaster. The inmate called her personal phone 9 times between October and December 2019 and listed her personal number under the name of his ex-partner. He was later transferred from HMP Moorland to HMP Leeds. The court heard there was no sexual contact between the pair, and the relationship with Mr. Millward lasted between November 2019 to February 2020. Richard Barradell, mitigating, said he accepted prison security had been compromised, but Miss Story's wrongdoing went no further than a sexual chat. Miss Story's manager became concerned after their meetings took longer than usual and had noticed that Miss Story had met Mr. Millward in the reception area of HMP Moorland. Mr. Barradell said she had no previous convictions but was vulnerable and at a low ebb because of bereavements at the time of the offending. She was struggling to extradite herself from this relationship. She is utterly ashamed and very, very embarrassed. She has lost her job as a result and now works in a pharmacy. Miss Story of Coventry Grove, Doncaster, pleaded guilty to willful misconduct in a public office. Judge Michael Slater told her, "In my view, this does cross the custody threshold. You abused a position of trust. You were sufficiently experienced to be aware of the dangers of this type of liaison. What you did potentially undermines the moral authority of the prison service. Had it gone any further, the outcome of this hearing today would be very different." The judge sentenced Miss Story to 3 months behind bars to be suspended for 12 months. She was subsequently dismissed from her position working for Care UK based at HMP Moorland. Detective Scott Jarvis, speaking after the case, said, "The public quite rightly expect high standards of conduct from those working within the prison service. Miss Story's behaviour was inappropriate and criminal, and I am pleased that she accepted responsibility for her crimes before a court. South Yorkshire's Police Prison Crime Unit will continue to work alongside our prison partners and take any inappropriate relationship or any other form of corruption very seriously. We will pursue anyone engaging in such activity and remove them from employment in Her Majesty's prisons. Those involved in serious criminality will find themselves converted from employee to inmate." Security Governor for HMP Moorland, Emma Moline, said, "We are pleased to work in partnership with South Yorkshire's Police Prison Crime Unit, who took prompt action on this case to support us in tackling inappropriate action and corruption within the prison. The reason for Mr. Millward's imprisonment was not discussed in the court, and the CPS did not provide any details when requested." There was another incident where an inmate had dosed a prison guard with urine and had escaped being sent back to jail. Aaron Stubley had been serving a 5-year prison sentence for burglary at HMP Moorland when he squirted a prison officer with urine from a shampoo bottle. A convict who sliced part of his ear off days before squirting urine in a prison officer's face because he was someone he didn't like had avoided being locked up again. Aaron Stubley had been serving a 5-year prison sentence for burglary at HMP Moorland and had struggled with his mental health throughout the beginning of the COVID pandemic. The 32-year-old had pleaded with the prison service to move him into a prison closer to home in Middlesbrough, but it felt as if he was being ignored Sheffield Crown Court heard. Mr Stubley was released from that sentence on September the 25th, but exactly 1 month before that, he'd filled a bottle of shampoo with urine and squirted it all over a prison guard. Prosecutor Stephanie Hollis told the court that the prison officer had been escorting prisoners to their cell, having collected their afternoon meals. From around 2 meters away, Mr Stubley squirted the urine onto the shirt and trousers of the prison officer, and later attempted to squeeze the bottle in his face. Another prison officer was also struck with the urine and had her shirt and trousers soaked. When asked why he had done it, Mr Stubley told the officers that he thought the prison officer was someone who deserved it. Gary Wood, defending, said his client had struggled significantly with the pandemic and lack of visits afforded to him and had self-harm whilst in custody. He added that he cut his own ear just 2 days prior to the ordeal, in which he soaked 2 prison officers with urine. The recorder, Felicity Davis, decided that, having heard Mr Stubley had attempted to turn his life around since, a suspended sentence would be the best option. She was told he had gained employment with Network Rail and was living on his own in accommodation for the first time. Mr Stubley of Robert Avenue, Middlesbrough, admitted 1 count of administering a noxious substance to aggrieve, injury and annoy, and was handed a 20-month prison term suspended for 2 years. He must also complete 20 rehabilitation activity requirement days. Thank you for joining us today. What are your opinions of HMP Moorland? Please let us know what you think in the comments below. Thank you for joining us today. If you enjoyed this content, please don't forget to like and share. And if you're new to the channel and you want to see more Street Crime UK content, hit subscribe and press that bell so you can join us on the next video. Thank you for joining us, and until next time, stay safe. Hello and welcome to the Street Crime UK YouTube channel. Please don't forget to like, share, comment and subscribe. Today we're going to take a look into the history of HM Prison Littlehey. HM Prison Littlehey is a Category C male prison in the village of Perry near Huddington in Cambridgeshire, England. Littlehey Prison is operated by Her Majesty's Prison Service. The prison only holds those that have been convicted of a sexual offence. The site was originally known as Gaines Hall Youth Custody Centre and was used as a borstal for juvenile males from 1945 to 1983, when the establishment was closed and demolished. Littlehey was built in its place and opened as an integrated Category C prison for adult males in 1988. In April 2003, an inspection report from Her Majesty's Chief Inspector of Prisons criticised Littlehey Prison for not helping inmates integrate back into society. The report found that prisoners needed more help with finding jobs and accommodation before their release, but noted positively that the staff had good relationships with the prisoners and were doing better managing the healthcare of the prisoners. Littlehey is a purpose-built Category C prison for adult males. The accommodation at Littlehey comprises of 8 residential units, 2 of which are ready-to-use units, one added in 1997 and the second in 2003. Most cells are single occupancy, but there are some shared cells. Littlehey Prison reports that it provides a range of work provisions for inmates, including accredited vocational training course in forklift trucks, carpentry, joinery, motor mechanics, hospitality and education. Classes range from basic and key skills to degree level learning. In January 2010, HMP Littlehey opened a large expansion to its current site to accommodate a population of up to 480 young offenders. This investment has allowed for the addition of 4 new accommodation blocks, an all-weather sports pitch, and a gymnasium, adult learning and kitchen buildings. The regime claims to focus on providing young offenders with a portfolio of skills and qualifications to change their futures. Employability and functional skills are said to be the centre of the establishment's drive towards reducing reoffending. There is also a prisoner visitor centre, which is operated by the Ormiston Children and Family Trust. In January 2011, a disturbance at the prison left 2 prison officers injured. In 2014, the prison was recategorised to accommodate prisoners convicted of sexual offences, falling within the Category C security level. In 2015, reports from the Independent Monitoring Board observed that HMP Littlehey had an unusually high population of inmates over the age of 50. It was 34% at the time. Concerns were raised over the
lack of provisions for elderly and disabled prisoners, and reports have emerged of inmates struggling with wheelchair access and not receiving support for health problems such as incontinence. In 2018, it was found that there were serious problems over outstanding maintenance work. 1,300 maintenance jobs were outstanding in January 2018. Some showers had been out of action for 2 years, and some prisoners were without heating for 8 months. Prison officers sent disproportionate time dealings with maintenance problems. Trust between prisoners and staff had broken down because staff could not meet the prisoners' basic needs. Andrew Nielsen of the Howard League for Penal Reform said, "The lamentable conditions in Littlehey are indicative of the pressures that exist in our now overburdened and under-resourced prison system. No prison should be allowed to deteriorate in this way. But it is particularly shocking in a jail where around half of the prisoners are over 50 and a significant number are elderly and disabled." In 2019, HMIP inspected the prison, and overall, despite some criticisms, the report reflects some good findings and some excellent outcomes for prisoners at Littlehey. Prison had a clearly defined function and held a suitable number of elevated risk men in safe and respectful conditions. Prisoners benefited from a very good daily regime, and we saw examples of good practice. Going forward, the prisoners' main priorities are to access and reduce the risk of prisoners it holds, and to prepare those being released for successful resettlement into the community. Former notable inmates at the prison are Barry Bennell, Max Clifford, Stephen Darwin and Alex Hepburn. Accommodation in HMP Littlehey comprises of the following wing: A wing, which is a general population wing; B wing, which is also a general population wing; C wing, which is a community wing run on rehabilitative culture principles; D wing, which is a general population wing; E wing, which is the induction unit; F wing, which is the progression unit for enhanced residence; G wing is also a progression unit for enhanced residence; H wing, which is accredited with enabling environments; I wing, which is an elderly unit with support; J wing, which is also an elderly unit with support; K wing, which is the general population; and L wing, which is also the general population. M wing is the indeterminate sentence for public protection IPP unit. Wings A to H are on the original site and are referred to locally as Lakeside. Wings I to L are on the newer site and are referred to locally as Woodlands. The regime includes offending behaviour programs including enhanced thinking skills, sex offender treatment program, the 12 steps drug program, and A to Z motivational courses. The prison strives to support release plans through effective sentence planning and support resettlement through the Foundation Training Company Program, Job Centre Plus and NARCO. Support through buddies to combat bullying and listeners to support those at risk from suicide and self-harm, and race equality officers to assist with diversity issues. Prison addresses drug misuse of prescribed and illicit drugs within the establishment as a whole. There is a carrots team and a erupt program, as well as extensive VDT program. HMP YOI Littlehey has a Type 2 healthcare facility with healthcare services commissioned by the PCT and course nursing staff being provided by the prison service. It is unsuitable for these prisoners requiring 24 care. There are 2 healthcare departments, one for each side of the establishment to meet the needs of both young offenders and Category C prisoners. Mental health in-reach services are provided by Peterborough and Cambridgeshire NHS Foundation Trust. GP services are provided by Medacs, combined with the wide variety of nurse-led, pharmacy-led clinics. Additionally, on-site specialist services include dentistry, optometry, podiatry and physiotherapy. Services normally delivered in the secondary care such as genitourinary medication, ENT, dermatology are all provided within the establishment. HMP YOI Littlehey works in partnership through a multi-agency approach to provide safe, decent and constructive regime that challenges offender behaviour, reduces reoffending and prevents further victims. To do this, they provide a wide range of work provisions including accredited vocational courses in carpentry, joinery, motor mechanics, hospitality, ICT, educational classes ranging from basic to key skill and degree level general learning. Work is offered in the workshops in orderly positions throughout the position. Education is provided by Milton Keynes College. HMP Littlehey was inspected in August 2019, and in their report, the inspectors had this to say. Located near Huddington in Cambridgeshire, Littlehey is a Category C training prison holding up to 1,220 adult male prisoners, with a specialist function and holding men from across the country. The prison is one of a very small number that holds only those convicted of a sexual offence, and as such, the profile of prisoners held is very unusual. 44% of prisoners were serving lengthy sentences between 4 and 10 years, with over a third serving more than 10 years. Around 150 prisoners were serving intermediate sentences, including life. Among the population, nearly half were over the age of 50, and of all those held, some 78% presented a high risk or very high risk of harm. When we inspected Littlehey in 2015, we found a prison that was both safe and respectful, but where outcomes in purposeful activity and rehabilitation and release plannings were insufficiently good. At this inspection, we were pleased to find that outcomes in safety and respect remained good and had improved in purposeful activity, but disappointingly remained insufficient in the important test of rehabilitation. Littlehey continued to be an overwhelmingly safe prison. New prisoners were received well into the prison and helped to settle. The prison was calm, and prisoners reported to us that they felt very safe. Very little violence was recorded, and a culture that incentivized good behaviour helped greatly. There had been some increase in some use of force, but oversight was satisfactory, and the use of segregation had decreased since our last inspection. The segregation regime was also much better, with reintegration actively supported. Security arrangements were proportionate, and the use of illicit drugs remained low. Self-harm had increased in recent years, but again remained low. There had tragically been one self-inflicted death since our last visit, but care for those in crisis was generally very good. In our survey of prisoners, the majority indicated that they felt respected by staff, and the interactions we observed were relaxed, although not always particularly proactive. They were improving, however, following the successful induction of the key worker scheme. The internal and external areas of the prison were clean and well maintained, although some overcrowding and ongoing problems with heating systems were significant issues. Access to kit and other amenities was good, as was the quality of food. General consultation arrangements were also good, and while the promotion of equality had weaknesses, outcome for prisoners across the most protected characteristics were reasonably equitable. Prisoners were positive in their views about quality and healthcare they received. Time out of cell for most prisoners in full-time activity was good, although we found a surprisingly high 17% locked in cell during the workday. There was sufficient activity for all, but allocation arrangements were inflexible and unresponsive. The quality and range of education, training and work was good, and prisoners could gain qualifications up to level 3. Many made satisfactory progress and were clearly engaged and motivated. Our colleagues of Ofsted judged the overall effectiveness of educational skills and work to be good, and physical education was very impressive. The area where outcomes were weakest were in the rehabilitation and release planning. The promotion of family ties needed improvement. About half of prisons did not have an up-to-date offender assessment system, OASIS assessment, many having arrived without such an assessment. This was concerning given the high level of risk the population presented. Contact between offender supervisors and prisoners was inconsistent and often reactive, with very little one-to-one sentence planning work taking place. There was also quite limited opportunity for those prisoners who did not meet the threshold for participation in the offender behaviour programs. Those who were eligible could normally access the programs prior to release. Public protection arrangements were not sufficiently robust, and the prison had only recently introduced resettlement initiatives capable of supporting sufficiently the approximately 30 men discharged each month. Overall, and despite some criticisms, this report reflects some very good findings and some excellent outcomes for prisoners at Littlehey. The prison had a clearly defined function and held a substantial number of elevated risked men in safe and respectful conditions. Prisoners benefited from the very good daily regime, and we saw examples of good practice. Going forward, the prison's main priorities are to access and reduce the risk of prisoners it holds, and to prepare those being released for successful resettlement into community. This report was made by Peter Clark, CVO OBE QPM, on July 2019. Cameron Khan, who was 39, had begun blackmailing a man at HMP Littlehey in 2018. The prisoner blackmailed a fellow inmate into transferring thousands of pounds into his mother's bank account and intimidated the victim when demands for more failed. Cameron Khan, who was 39, began blackmailing the man at HMP Littlehey after an incident where the latter's son was assaulted near his workplace. The victim, a man in his 40s, had not told anyone in the prison about the assault when Khan approached him and asked about his son's welfare. In August 2018, Khan told the victim if he didn't give him £2,000, his son would be attacked again. The man was given the bank details of Budar Mahmood, Mr. Khan's mother, and told to make the transfer. The victim organised the bank transfer, but then, in October 2018, Mr. Khan demanded a further £5,000 and suggested the man's wife would be attacked if he did not comply. When the man asked for more time to complete the transfer, Mr. Khan intimidated the man in an attempt to make him comply. Mr. Khan, who is currently serving an 8-year sentence for indecent assault and false imprisonment, was previously living in Bolton and had denied the 2 charges of blackmail. Miss Mahmood, who was 62 of Netherfield Road, Bolton, also denied acquiring criminal property. However, they were found guilty on the charges following a trial at Cambridge Crown Court in November. On May the 20th, at Peter Crown Court, Mr. Khan was ordered to serve an additional 2 years and 10 months in prison, and Miss Mahmood was handed an 18-month community order and told to complete 30 hours of rehabilitation activity. DC John Whitworth said Mr. Khan used intimidation as he attempted to exploit victims for his own financial gain. The victim in this case was terrified about the consequences of not complying. He only felt able to come forward when he confided in another prisoner, who persuaded him to speak out about what had happened. There was also another incident of a sexual assault on a female member of staff at HMP Littlehey. Liam McCarthy was found shirtless and on top of a female prison officer. The man, who was convicted of sexually assaulting a member of hospital staff, had admitted trapping a female prison officer in his cell and attacking her. Liam McCarthy, who was 28, grabbed the officer by the throat and barricaded her in his cell at HMP Littlehey in Cambridgeshire. Guards forced their way in and found him shirtless on top of the woman. He has now had 2 years and 8 months added to his sentence for false imprisonment and actual bodily harm. Appearing at Peterborough Crown Court via video link from HMP Wakefield, where he was moved to following the assault, he pleaded guilty to both charges. Mr. McCarthy was jailed for 12 years for rape in 2016 after, as an outpatient, he followed a female member of staff of Birmingham City Hospital into a staff toilet and attacked her, threatening to kill her if she cried out. The prison officer he attacked had only recently completed training, and the assault occurred during a routine cell check at the jail. Mr. McCarthy used the wardrobe and other items to barricade her in his cell after choking her. It is believed at some point during the attack, she lost consciousness or was knocked out. The officer was treated for bruising by medical staff at HMP Littlehey, which holds about 1,200 inmates, mainly sex offender and rapists. Detective Constable Tom Nuttall from Cambridgeshire Police said, "This vicious attack could have continued had the victim's colleagues not intervened." Mr. McCarthy was sentenced to an extra 32 months in jail for falsely imprisoning an officer, to be served consecutively to his current jail term. He was sentenced to 12 months for assaulting the officer, causing her actually bodily harm, which is to be served concurrently as well. Thank you for joining us today. What are your opinions of HMP Littlehey? Please let us know what you think in the comments below. Thank you for joining us today. If you enjoyed this content, please don't forget to like and share. And if you're new to the channel and you want to see more Street Crime UK content, hit subscribe and press that bell so you can join us on the next video. Thank you for joining us, and until next time, stay safe.
Hello and welcome to the Street Crime UK YouTube channel. Please don't forget to like, share, comment and subscribe. Today we take a look at another notorious prison in the UK criminal justice system. HMP Wakefield is a high security prison for men, typically in category A's and B. It is one of 8 high security prisons across England and is a main life centre with a focus on serious sex offenders. HMP Wakefield has been a site of a prison since 1594. The current prison is built around a Victorian style floor plan. There are 4 main residential wings, A, B, C and D. Each wing has 4 levels and holds approximately 185 prisoners in single cells. A major refurbishment of the accommodation was completed in 2006. This gave the facility of kitchens on all units so that the prisoners can prepare their own meals. Association areas were also provided on each unit. B Wing houses a small unit for remand prisoners with a separate and contained regime. It also houses prisoners with serious physical disabilities in special larger cells. A separate wing houses the segregation unit and the close supervision unit. HMP Wakefield was given a full inspection in the summer of 2018, and the report had this to say. HMP Wakefield is a high security establishment holding Category A and B prisoners. At the time of this inspection, there were some 700 being held in the jail. The vast majority were serving sentences of more than 10 years, and included some of the most challenging and complex prisoners in the country. Despite this, the prison was calm and had an atmosphere that spoke of good order, safety, security, and decency. This was reflected in the assessments under our 4 healthy prison tests. In particular, the improved assessment of purposeful activity and the continuing highest possible assessment of good in that area of respect. The identification and promulgation of good practice is, I believe, a key function of the inspection process. To that end, I would urge the readers to pay particular attention to the examples cited in Section 5 of this report. They include a varied and impressive set of initiatives and good work drawn from across all of the healthy prison tests. A problem that was not unique to Wakefield, but which is particularly acute there, was that of transferring prisoners under the Mental Health Act to secure accommodation. Because of the totally unacceptable delays in doing so, many prisoners across the estate are held in conditions that are not in any way therapeutic, and indeed many cases clearly accelerate their condition. This is a national strategic issue to which we have made reference to many times in inspection reports. The situation at Wakefield was yet another example of prisoners with severe illnesses not receiving the care that they needed. It is clearly something that is beyond the capability of either individual prisons or HM Prison and Probation Service, the HMPPS, to resolve. Therefore, in view of the fact that to date there has been no effective response to this issue, on this occasion, I am taking the unusual step of making a recommendation directly to the prison minister in a hope that he can use his influence to initiate effective cross-departmental action to address the problem. We found HMP Wakefield to be an essentially respectful prison, with many examples of good relationships and interactions between staff and prisoners. However, in many establishments, our survey revealed that black and minority ethnic prisoners had a poorer perception of their treatment and condition than their white counterparts. These negative perceptions needed to be understood. Until this happened, there would be no way of knowing whether the negative perceptions were justified or not. And even if they were not, the negative perceptions themselves needed to be taken seriously and addressed. Despite the fact that we had found an overall improvement in that area of purposeful activity, there was still a need to provide sufficient activity places for the entire population. This would then complement the adequate time out of cell that was already available to those who were employed. The introduction of key workers offering an ongoing link between individual prisoners and identified officers was a key strategic initiative. Early indications were that this could be a highly significant development, and once it was fully embedded, could well offer the opportunity for further improvement in the area of rehabilitation and release planning. By any standard, this was a good inspection, which was highly credible given the complexity of the prison. The high standards, good practice and improvements which we have seen being achieved were the result of hard work and dedication of those who took it very seriously as their responsibility to keep safe and secure the prisoners which were in their care. HMP Wakefield offers a range of regime activities that encourages offenders to make the necessary changes which can help them to lead law-abiding lives in the custody and after release. These activities include charity work, where offenders make commissioned pieces of art, garden furniture, stained glass and model work. Offending behaviour programs include courses for those with substance abuse problems, sexual offending histories and a general need to enhance their thinking process. An additional course called Foundation helps give offenders the necessary insights they require before accessing further programs. There is a dedicated team of staff who assess the needs of offenders with disabilities, those who are over 60, and foreign national offenders. The prison offers numerous intervention programs. These include Thinking Skills Program, TSP, including a new updated core extended adapted sex offender treatment programs, or commonly known as SOTP, a healthy sexual functioning program, HSFP. There is a course called Focus which addresses drug and alcohol treatment programs, Carrots, which is a relapse prevention program, one-to-one sessions and detox referrals, auricular acupuncture, pre-release and offender development, and a voluntary drug testing scheme. Psychological services and support are provided to those prisoners who require help. The canteen is provided by DHL to all offenders who can order items from a shopping list, including fresh produce for collection throughout the wing on a wing rota basis. The gymnasium facility at HMP Wakefield offers an extensive selection of activities that operate on a rotation to ensure all offenders have access to a range of physical activities. Specialised classes are also offered, including over 60 afternoon sessions. The kitchens are run by a mix of civilian and approximately 30 offenders, providing meals for the whole establishment. The food offered caters for the majority of religious, cultural and medical diets. A new initiative of NVQ certificated training qualifications is at present being developed in a specially designed training kitchen, as well as in the main prison kitchen itself. This enables offenders who are keen to work in this area to be involved in the process and be motivated in the process of large-scale catering. The chaplaincy team is of multiple faiths. It provides pastoral care for offenders and staff and endeavours to enable all offenders to practice the religion of their choice, privately or cooperatively. The faiths covered include Catholic, Church of England, Islam, Paganism, Jehovah's Witness, Rastafarianism, Buddhism, Hinduism, Sikhism and Judaism. The healthcare which is linked to the prison is West Yorkshire, who undertook the full commissioning responsibility in April of 2006. There is a unit with 4 cells and a camera observation for those offenders at particular risk of medical difficulties. The unit also houses a crisis suite for offenders who are of an exceptional risk of self-harm or suicide. In addition to these facilities, the unit offers an inpatient ward and several clinics. HMP Wakefield is one of the most dangerous prisons in the country. But what is it like for the people who work there and for the people who live in and around the area? Behind the high walls and barred up windows of HMP Wakefield live some of the most evil and depraved men alive. But just yards away from Wakefield Prison lies a quiet community-driven street called Victoria Avenue. The two settings couldn't be higher in contrast to one another. HMP Wakefield, which is just off Love Lane, is classed as a high security Category A men's prison and has become known nationwide for holding some of the most depraved criminals in Britain. Some of the most notorious inmates in the country have spent time in HMP Wakefield. These names include Harold Shipman, who was considered to be the most prolific serial killer in UK history, the black cab rapist John Warboys, and Ian Watkins, who is serving 29 years imprisonment for 13 sexual offences. It has also been revealed that Robert Maudsley, who has been dubbed the most dangerous prisoner in the UK, is kept locked away in a glass cell in the basement of the prison for 23 hours a day. We will be making a documentary on Mr. Maudsley very soon, so please don't forget to check it out. However, despite the notoriety of the men inside, the majority of residents living in houses just yards away from the prison have said that they feel perfectly safe. Richard Smart, who worked at HMP Wakefield for 4 years and now lives on Victoria Avenue, said, "The security in that place and how it is run is second to none. So yes, I do feel secure." When asked about his time spent working in Monster Mansion, Mr. Smart said, "It didn't bother me particularly, because you are trained to keep the prisoners at arm's length. You've got to keep your wits about you, but it's still a very, very secure place. I never felt frightened at any time." However, other residents have not expressed the same safety. Keisha, who lived behind the area of HMP Wakefield for 3 years, admitted that sometimes she worries about what could happen if an incident at the prison did arise. She said, "On a morning, there's just me and the little one in the house. I don't know if it's a mother's instinct, but I do find it a little scary just in case something ever did happen. I know the chances are very slim, but you have to think about it." An annual report published by the Prison Watchdog, the Independent Monitoring Board, also known as the IMB, described the practices of HMP Wakefield as simply unacceptable. There is a rule in the UK prison system known as Prison Rule 45. This rule allows governors to isolate prisoners from the general population. The report by the IMB of HMP Wakefield expressed extreme concern for one inmate who has been separated for 949 days collectively at Wakefield and at another high security prison. It is reported that this prisoner is still in isolation today. 3 other prisoners had served 100, 200 and 300 days under Rule 45 at HMP Wakefield. Segregated prisoners are placed on the F wing, which has 21 cells and an additional 8 cells which prisoners can be monitored under close supervision. The IMB said there was a lack of evidence of the prison being able to manage prisoners with complex behaviours, such as those with the ability to commit extreme acts of violence and end up in segregation. The IMB added that the practice of long-term segregation and the physical environment at HMP Wakefield was more likely than not to induce rather than prevent mental ill health. The IMB criticised the practice of the prisoners being moved from one segregation unit to another at the new high security prison, referred to in the report as long-term high security estates. The report reads, "What we see at HMP Wakefield is a merry-go-round of seg to seg transfers which appear to be facilitated by informal negotiations between the governors. This is simply wrong and must be ceased. Transferring problematic prisoners around the long-term high security estates without a long-term plan is unlikely to provide any meaningful opportunities to tackle the root causes of their behaviour. In other areas, the report found that through 2020 and 2021, self-harming incidents had significantly increased, with the number of individuals who self-harmed being more than doubled from 72 to 158. However, they found the violent incidents in the prison had reduced from 177 to 113. Overall, they found the prison to be a safe, orderly and disciplined prison. But due to the violent nature of some of the inmates, there is an ever-present threat to other prisoners and staff. They also added that the prisoners are, on whole, treated fairly, aside from the Prison Rule 45 issue, and that their physical health needs are generally met. At the time of writing the report, the IMB noted that there are currently 740 prisoners at the Love Lane prison, including 285 of those serving life sentences. What are your opinions on HMP Wakefield? Do you agree that the staff are doing a good job looking after some of the most dangerous prisoners in the UK? What are your opinions of Prison Rule number 45? Do you agree that prisoners should be kept isolated away from others for long periods of time? Or do you think this will just make the problem much worse? Have you or anyone you know ever been to HMP Wakefield? Please let us know in the comments below. Thank you for joining us today. If you enjoyed this content, please don't forget to like and share, and if you're new to the channel and you enjoyed the Street Crime UK content, please don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell button so you can join us on the next video. Thank you for joining us today, and until next time, stay safe.
Hello and welcome to the Street Crime UK YouTube channel. Please don't forget to like, share, comment and subscribe. Today we're looking at HM Prison Hatfield. Formerly HMP or Young Offenders Institution Moorland Open is a Category D men's prison and young offenders institution located near Hatfield Woodhouse in South Yorkshire, England. The prison is operated by Her Majesty's Prison Service. In August 2006, a report from Her Majesty's Chief Inspector of Prisons stated that both Moorland and HMP and Young Offenders Institution Hatfield prisons were well managed and provided a safe and respectful environment from inmates and staff. However, the report also claimed that there is more of a third of prisoners who were unoccupied at HMP and Young Offenders Institution Hatfield, with a lengthy waiting list of inmates wanting to join education classes. Weeks later, it was revealed that in a 3-year period, 190 inmates had escaped from Hatfield. The prison service did not have statistics on how many of these inmates had been recaptured, but claimed that most would have been returned to a closed prison at some point. In 2010, HMP Moorland Open changed its name to HMP Hatfield, which is still managed jointly with HMP Moorland. On the 13th of July 2011, it was announced that HMP Hatfield will be put out to tender, accepting bids from private companies and Her Majesty's Prison Service for the management of the establishment. Prisoners are usually transferred from other prisons, especially Moorland Closed Prison, to complete their sentences at HMP Hatfield. Accommodation at the prison comprises 4 units for adult male prisoners and 1 unit for young offenders. All cells are single occupancy. Adult prisoners at HMP Hatfield are usually placed in resettlement employment with outside companies with guaranteed minimum wage. Young offenders are usually placed in education and vocational training. Courses include industrial, cleaning and catering. One notable inmate was Naseem Hamed, who was known for his unconventional boxing antics. In July 2011, it was announced that Hatfield, along with Moorland and HMP Lindholm, both large, closed Category C prisons, would be part of the PCP2 market testing programme. The prison service had bid to manage the 3 prisons in a clustering arrangement, but the contract was initially awarded to the private sector, a decision which was subsequently reversed in 2013, and the prison remained in public ownership run by HMPS. During 2012 to 2013, Hatfield was part of the South Yorkshire cluster, but has since become a standalone resettlement establishment. Hatfield officially separated from HMP Moorland in April 2014, and has also taken over the previous HMP Lindholm I-Wing, known as the Lake Site, which since June 2015 has been used to accommodate all new arrivals for an initial 3-month period before they progress to the main Hatfield site. There are approximately 8 residential units, A to F on the main site and G to H on the Lake site, approximately 4 miles from the main site. A, B and C units are 20 rooms per landing across 3 floors. D and E accommodate 40 prisoners across 2 floors, and F unit is a self-contained 6-bed unit that provides independent living for 6 prisoners. G and H units each accommodate 56 prisoners. Offending behaviour groups included enhanced thinking skills courses, welfare to work and job clubs. A listener scheme for those prisoners who may be at risk from suicide or self-harm is also operated. The prison runs various 3 accredited offending behaviour programmes, including thinking skills, which addresses the prisoners' cognitive skills, allowing them to look at problem solving in relation to their offending behaviour and general life decisions, and Calm, which is an anger management programme addressing issues of emotional violence in relation to offending behaviour. The medical facilities and support is supplied by Nottinghamshire Healthcare NHS Trust. The prison, in conjunction with its education provider, the Manchester College, run a variety of educational courses to assist the prisoners. Facilities within the prison include industrial cleaning, with a BIC qualification available, gardening catering, as well as a community task force undertaking work outside the prison confines. The prison has links with outside companies and encourages the adult prisoners to gain employment with them when nearing the end of their custodial sentence. The prison was inspected during August 2019. In this report, the inspector said that Hatfield is a Category D resettlement prison for men situated near Doncaster in South Yorkshire. The prison is split across 2 sites, a main site and a further site that used to form part of HMP Lindholm, but is now used for receptions into the prison and is usually referred to as Hatfield Lakes or the Lake site. At the time of this inspection, the prison held a little under 380 men, of whom around 70 were aged over 50. And the prison was last inspected in 2015, on which occasion it attracted the highest grading of good in all 4 of our healthy prison tests. On this occasion, the prison again inspected very well, achieving good grades across the board. A new governor was in the process of taking up post during this inspection, but the prison had benefited from consistent leadership over a number of years, which was also reflected in what appeared to be a settled, mature and very competent staff group. The prison was unequivocally safe, violence was very rare, and the overwhelming majority of prisoners felt safe, and staff struggled to recall the last time there had been an assault. No incidents of self-harm had been recorded in the year preceding the inspection, and the impression that I gained was that the institution was relaxed and well ordered. The incentive scheme operated well, and the numbers placed on the report was lower than any other Category D prisons in the use of force was also very rare. The inspector was very impressed to learn that if a prisoner transgressed in some way, rather than halt his potential progression with an immediate return to closed conditions, he would typically be sent to Lakeside for a period of assessment in order to decide the best way forward. It seemed to him that this approach had much to commend it. Relationships between staff and prisoners were good, and there was a clear sense of community. However, the prison was not funded for the Offender Management in Custody programme, which limited the amount of time available for staff to interact on a one-to-one basis with prisoners. There was also a need to conduct further work and analysis to understand inequalities and perceptions of inequality, revealed both by our survey and the prison data. We also felt that a broader review of consultation arrangements would be beneficial to demonstrate the value of what was being done, as part of a broader work to improve confidence in the complaints process. Although generally the sites were in good condition and living conditions reasonable, some units were showing signs of age and needed refurbishment. We were given to understand that funding for this work had been bid for, but had already been allocated elsewhere, and would not become available for at least 2 years. As was to be expected in an establishment of this kind, time out of cell was excellent. Our colleagues from Ofsted judged that the leadership and management of learning, skills and work were good, and the achievement of qualifications on most courses was at a very high level. 1 in 5 prisoners were released into the community on employment and training placements, although it was not always possible to see clear linkages between these placements and long-term career aspirations on release. The number of releases on temporary licence was dependent upon individual members of staff with extensive local knowledge, energy and expertise, rather than robust documented processes. Nevertheless, we felt that the overall provision of purposeful activity remained good in terms of our Healthy Prison test. It was also pleasing to see that home detention curfew processes were well managed, with all applications during the past 6 months having been approved and most put into action at the earliest opportunity. It was also good to see that the Multi-Agency Public Protection Arrangement or MAPA levels were confirmed before prisoners gained access to release on temporary licence, which is better than we often see. It is also pleasing to see that no prisoners had been released homeless during the previous 6 months, and that every prisoner was discussed at a discharge board prior to release, which we consider to be good practice. This was obviously a very positive inspection, and it is good to see that after the previous excellent inspection in 2015, complacency has not been allowed to take root. Hatfield was a well-run and decent establishment, fulfilling its role in preparing men for their release. There was much to commend, and the leadership of the staff should take pride in what they have achieved and how they encourage the prisoners to play an active role in making it safe, decent and purposeful establishment. The public have been warned not to approach a robber as he goes on run from Doncaster Jail. A man's gone on the run from a Doncaster jail, and police who are searching for him are warning the public not to approach him. South Yorkshire's Police Prison Crime Unit says that Almus Eula has absconded from HMP Hatfield and is appealing to the public to help catch him. They have revealed that he had previously been jailed for robbery before he went missing from the site near Thorn Road on Hatfield. Mr. Eula, aged 33, was seen leaving the open prison on Sunday, May the 2nd at around 5:30 p.m. without authority and is now wanted for absconding from lawful custody. The police revealed that he is currently serving an intermediate sentence for robbery. Mr. Eula is 5 foot 6 inches and of slim build. He currently has a full beard and has 2 scars, one on his left arm and the other down the centre of his stomach. He also has 2 tattoos, the name Kath on his left arm and a Chinese symbol on his right arm. A spokesman for South Yorkshire Police said that Mr. Eula has known links to Leeds and Bradford, so could have travelled to West Yorkshire. Next, we're looking at a convicted killer who escaped from Doncaster Open Prison on Christmas Eve and police had no idea where he was. The inmate that was serving a sentence for burglary escaped from an open prison in Hatfield, Doncaster. Ryan Hill, 41, had previously been jailed for manslaughter in 2008 but was recalled to prison for burglary last year. He left Hatfield Prison on Christmas Eve and has not returned since. Prison staff noticed that Hill was missing at around 10:30 p.m. and notified police, but officers have been unable to locate him. They're now asking for the public to help them track Hill down, who is described as being around 6 foot 3 inches tall with a medium build and blonde hair. One of his front teeth is missing and he has a number of tattoos, including one saying Bulldog, breed, Oggy, on his right arm. Mr. Hill is known to have links to Wakefield and Upton areas of West Yorkshire, as well as Milton Keynes, Buckinghamshire and Salisbury near Thirsk, North Yorkshire. So what are your thoughts on Her Majesty's Prison and Young Offenders Institution Hatfield? Please let us know what you think in the comments below. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, stay safe. Hello and welcome to the Street Crime UK YouTube channel. Please don't forget to like, share, comment and subscribe. Today we look at the history and tales of HM Prison Portland. HM Prison Portland is a male adult/young offenders institution in the village of the Grove on the Isle of Portland in Dorset, England. It is operated by Her Majesty's Prison Service. The prison was originally opened in 1848 as an adult convict establishment, before becoming a borstal in 1921 and a YOI in 1988. In 2011 it became an adult/young offenders establishment. Portland Prison opened in 1848 for the holding of adult convicts. The purpose of a prison at Portland was largely to make use of convict labour in the construction of the breakwaters of Portland Harbour and its various defences. The first convicts, totaling 64, arrived aboard the HM Steamer Driver on the 21st of November. The Admiralty quarries were developed for convicts to work in, and once established, convict labour was providing 10,000 tonnes of stone per week for use on the breakwaters. The conditions within both the prison and its quarries throughout the 19th century would later help for calls to penal reform in the UK, as many prisoners died while quarrying stone. From the moment of the prison's inception, the convicts became a tourist attraction. The village of the Grove had been developed directly due to the prison, and a number of homeowners decided to open cafes from the upstairs of their houses for tourists to watch the convicts at work. In 1869, the government announced that the prison, which was originally intended to be temporary, would become a permanent establishment. Although local residents petitioned against this, it did not deter the government's plans. Between 1870 to 1872, convicts constructed the now redundant Grade II listed St. Peter's Church just outside the prison. In 1921, the prison was converted to a borstal. Between 1931 and 35, the Borstal Boys transformed a disused convict quarry into a sports stadium at the back of St. Peter's Church. The first sports day took place on the 1st of August 1936, while the last event spectated by the public was the Foundation Day sports event of 1975. During World War II, an air raid on the 15th of August 1940 saw the Borstal's Rodney House block bombed. This left 4 boys dead and others severely injured, including 5 being admitted to hospital. In 1983, the Borstal changed to the Youth Custody Centre. In 1988, the prison was re-rolled as a Young Offenders Institution or YOI in Portland, holding up to 519 young males aged 18 to 21. Accommodation at the prison was divided into 7 blocks: Benbow, Rayleigh, Drake, Nelson, Grenville, Collingwood and Beaufort. In 2009, the prison was the setting for Ian Wright's Football Behind Bars, a Sky One reality TV series showcasing Wright's work to transform the lives of 24 serious young offenders. It was based on socialising the young men by organising them in a football academy. In April 2011, the prison became an adult/young offenders establishment. In late 2013, it was announced that it would also be a number of resettlement prisons across the UK. In late 2013, it was announced that it would also be one of a number of resettlement prisons across the UK. This news coincided with the recent decision to turn HM Prison Durham, another prison on Portland, into an immigration removal centre. In 2010, with the assistance of the prison, a community project was completed to restore the Governor's Community Garden and open it to the public. In March 2000, an inspection report by Her Majesty's Chief Inspector of Prisons severely criticised conditions at Portland's Young Offender Institution, including foul-smelling toilets and filthy showers. There were also complaints of rats in food services areas lodged by inmates. Just over a month later, prison officials were forced to extract 26 prisoners who had for 8 hours used furniture to barricade themselves away from their cells. In November 2004, a report from the Chief Inspector of Prisons highlighted racial tension and distrust between Muslim inmates and staff at Portland Prison. The report also criticised the fact that inmates were still slopping out because of poor sanitation facilities at the jail. The report stated that some buildings were unfit for purpose and lacked basic sanitation, with the continued practice of inmates without access to the toilet facilities using buckets which they emptied through their windows. The report criticised other elements of the prison, including opportunities provided to prisoners for physical activity and training. In late 2013, it was announced by local news that a museum would be opened to cover the history of HM Prison Portland. The Grove Prison Museum opened in March 2014. Through the work of retired officers John Hutton, Steve Ashford and Chris Hunt. The museum is based in the former Deputy Governor's residence, across the road from the main prison entrance. The idea for a museum had dated back over 20 years when it was agreed to store some prison memorabilia items for a possible future museum. These were left untouched for 20 years in storage. A year after the museum's opening, it was announced that over 1,000 visitors had been to the museum. And one of the prison's and village's most notable features is a high wall running along the village's main road, Grove Road. This boundary wall remains a significant visual element within the village and was built in the 19th century to enclose the convict quarry workings. Grove Lime Kiln lies approximately 320 metres northwest of St Peter's Church. The Grade 2 listed structure was designated in January 2009. Still owned by the prison service, the lime kiln remains a derelict and uncared for state. It was built and once operated by convicts from the prison, and is an important survival and one of the last vestiges of lime production in Portland. Some notable former inmates: Mohammed Amir, Roy Chubby Brown, and Charles Wells. HMP/YOI Portland is a Category C closed facility. HMP/YOI Portland is a Category C closed facility holding up to 530 adult and young adult male prisoners. The population profile as a whole was relatively young, with 25% under the age of 21 and nearly 58% between 21 and 39. The vast majority of prisoners were serving more than 12 months, with nearly half serving between 2 and 4 years, and nearly a third serving longer than that. When we last inspected Portland in 2017, we expressed guarded optimism about the prison's future, despite finding some concerning outcomes. At the time, we found outcomes to be insufficiently good across 3 of our 4 tests of a healthy prison, and we rated safety as poor. At this inspection, we found that outcomes had not improved in any of our tests, and of greatest concern, the prison remained poor in safety. Prisoners arriving at Portland were received reasonably well into the institution, but induction was often delayed or cancelled. The early experience of many prisoners consisted of extended periods locked in a cell. Levels of violence had reduced following a recent increase in 2018, but remained high and comparable to the levels we saw in our last inspection. Work by the staff to tackle violence, as well as to challenge poor behaviour by prisoners, was not good enough. The situation was not helped by a failure to develop any kind of incentivising culture that might motivate prisoners to engage and behave. In contrast, the number of adjudications and the use of segregation had decreased since 2017. Indeed, the use of segregation was lower than at similar prisons, and lengths of stay were comparatively brief for most. Living conditions on the unit were better, although the regime was very limited. Some security arrangements were too restrictive, but the prison used intelligence well and had done some very good work to reduce an influx of illegal drugs. Data from mandatory drug tests suggested a positive rate of just over 5%. Levels of self-harm had doubled since our last inspection and were now very high. ACCTs of men in crisis was generally poor, and many experienced protracted periods of lockup and isolation. The prison had no safeguarding policy. Our observations suggested a reasonable quality of personnel interaction between staff and prisoners, but the paucity of the regime limited the ability of staff to engage consistently. Staff were too slow to challenge poor behaviour. It was no surprise that in our survey just 59% of prisoners thought staff treated them with respect. Consultations with prisoners was weak, as was the management of the applications and complaints process. The promotion of equality and diversity was similarly weak, but there was evidence that with the encouragement of the Prison Group Director's Office, improvements were beginning to be made. The prison provided reasonable healthcare, but facilities were poor and prisoners had difficulty accessing the service. The amount of time prisoners spent out of their cells was poor and reflected a limited and restricted regime prone to slippage and cancellations that ultimately undermined so much of the work of the establishment. A quarter of prisoners were not engaged in activity and could experience as little as 1 hour 15 minutes out of their cell each day. The curriculum offered in education and vocational training opportunities was appropriate, but there remained too few activity places. Those places that were available were underused, a situation compounded by continued poor punctuality and in some areas poor attendance, although generally attendance had improved since the last inspection. Those that did attend seemed motivated and made the progress expected of them. Teaching, learning and assessment were well planned, and there were some improvements in prisoners' achievements. Our colleagues in Ofsted assessed the overall effectiveness of provision as requires improvement. The relative remoteness of Portland meant that promoting good family ties remained a challenge. The prison had a good reducing reoffending strategy based on useful needs analysis, and since our last inspection the prison had reduced its backlog of offender assessments or OASYs by half. Too few prisoners said they had a sentence plan, and offending behaviour opportunities and one-to-one interventions were too limited. Public protection work was, however, good, and resettlement support for the approximately 40 prisoners released each month was reasonable despite most discharged prisoners returning to other parts of the country. Overall, their findings at the inspection were troubling. Outcomes had not declined, and there was no recent evidence that the impetus and initiative provided by the prison group director was having some beneficial effect. This, however, was not enough. They had concerns about whether local managers had realistic grounded plans to meet challenges the prison faced. The prison's approach to safety was lackluster. Basic standards were not maintained, and staff generally needed to have greater expectations of the prisoners they supervised. The prison also needed to refocus on its primary function as a training and resettlement prison and ensure first that it did the basics right. It urgently needed to ensure that an active and purposeful regime was being delivered and that this met fully the needs of the men held. Nearly 2/3 of the prison's population were under 30 years old. Only 11.5% of prisoners had been at Portland for a year or longer. The level of the prison self-harm had doubled since the previous inspection, and 16% of the population were sharing cells designed to hold one person. A quarter of prisoners were unemployed during the core day. Half the prisoners released were from outside Portland's resettlement catchment area. The public physical health provider is Care UK and the mental health provider Care UK. Their substance use treatment provider is EDP. The learning and skills provider is Weston College. The Community Rehabilitation Company or CRC, Dorset, Devon and Cornwall, CRC, subcontracted to Catch-22 escort contractor GeoAmy. One baseline CNA is the sum total of all certified accommodation in an establishment except cells in segregation units, healthcare cells or rooms that are not routinely used to accommodate long-stay patients. In use CNA is baseline CNA less those places not available for immediate use, such as damaged cells affected by building works, cells taken out of use due to staff shortages. Operational capacity is the total number of prisoners that an establishment can hold without serious risk to good order, security, and the proper running of the planned regime. In recent history, a Portland inmate was found with a makeshift weapon and was sentenced. The inmate has been given more prison time after he was found in possession of a makeshift weapon, a vape pen with a screwdriver attached to it during a jail fight. Clive Kashif Smith Khan, aged 23, was serving a sentence at HMP/YLI Portland on July 23, 2020, when he was found to be in possession of a bladed or sharply pointed article without authorization. Prosecuting David Ryan told Bournemouth Crown Court that Smith Khan of St George, Bristol, pleaded guilty to the offence at Weymouth Magistrates Court on September 2nd of this year. He said the defendant was at a young offenders institution at Portland when an officer saw him in an altercation with another prisoner. The defendant tried to run away, but ran into the arms of another officer. There was a short struggle between them, and the defendant was found to be in possession of a vape pen with a screw attached to it. The officer did sustain a slight injury, but it is understood that it was not a deliberate assault. It was sustained in the toing and froing of trying to restrain the defendant. The court heard that Smith Khan had a number of previous convictions, and that the sentence he was serving at Portland Prison at the time was following a case at Bristol Crown Court on December 4th, 2018, which involved the charge of being in possession of a blade or knife. Mitigating Jonathan Underhill said that Smith Khan was at AMP Earlstoke in Wiltshire at the moment on recall, and he was due for release in December. He said that Mr. Smith Khan told me that he was handed the weapon by another person. Judge Brian Forster QC asked Smith Khan directly how he was doing at HMP Earlstoke. Smith Khan told the judge that he was trying to get parole soon and was keeping his head down. Smith Khan said that since I have been on this sentence, I have been involved in no fights. Judge Forster said the offence is a serious offence. If you have a weapon in your possession, it can lead to a situation where people are injured. You say you were given the weapon shortly before the incident. I do give you full credit for your guilty plea, but your case is aggravated by virtue of previous convictions. I hope things go well for you. Smith Khan was issued a 10-month prison sentence. Another notable story was when a prison officer was arrested after hidden cameras were allegedly found in a female changing room at HMP/YOI Portland. Police launched an investigation after the camera was allegedly discovered in the female staff changing room at HMP/YOI Portland. It was reportedly found at around 1:30 PM on Thursday the 29th. A Dorset police spokesman said it was also reported that at about 7:15 PM the same day, a fire was discovered in the changing rooms, which was extinguished by the fire service. A 45-year-old man from Weymouth was arrested on suspicion of voyeurism and arson and has since been released under investigation while inquiries continue. A prison service spokesman said a prison officer at HMP Portland has been suspended whilst the police investigation is carried out. It would be inappropriate to comment further at the time. Next, an inmate has been sentenced to an extended prison sentence after being found guilty of kicking an officer during a prison brawl. Tyrese Ansell, aged 20, kicked a prison officer in HM Prison Portland on April the 23rd after a conflict broke out between inmates and staff. The officer, who was restraining a prisoner during an in-yard altercation, was kicked in the ribs by Ansell, who was then restrained himself. Prosecutor Elizabeth Valera read a statement from the victim to Weymouth Magistrates Court. It said, "It's intimidating and I'm not the person I was prior to the incident." Mitigating Gary Crowther said that it is an enhanced prisoner and an inmate cannot become an enhanced prisoner unless they are doing something right in prison. In a previous hearing, Prosecutor Andrew Newman said that the strike to the ribs caused bruising and the officer had to sign off work for a month. During his return to work, the prison officer was regraded to a different role within the prison because he did not want to put himself in harm's way again. Ansell will now serve an additional 12 weeks in prison consecutive to his current sentence. He will also pay £150 compensation to the prison officer. Tommy Burton threw feces at prison officers. Tommy Burton, 36, pleaded guilty to 2 counts of administering a poison or noxious thing with intent to injure, aggrieve or annoy and wounding with intent. Burton was standing with a group of fellow inmates when he called the name of a female prison officer. He approached the prison officer and squirted a bottle containing a mixture of feces over her. The substance landed on her face and clothes. The incident is known as potting. He also assaulted a fellow inmate with a knife on Monday, March 13, 2017 at HMP Channingswood in Devon. Burton was jailed for 4 years and 4 months for wounding with intent and a further year for each of the other 2 counts to run consecutively. He was sentenced at Exeter Crown Court. Inspector Tony Burden of Dorset Police said, "We are committed to robustly investigating offences that occur in prisons and work very closely with the prison service to bring offenders to justice. These were particularly horrible incidents and we will not accept prison officers being assaulted in this way. They work in extremely challenging circumstances and I hope this sentence goes to show that we do take such offences very serious." Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to let us know what you think in the comments down below. And as always, stay safe.